Welcome back to part 19 of What If Naruto Was Told About the Secret to the Shadow Clone Jutsu. Please remember to like and subscribe as it motivates me to upload more in the future, and as always, link to the fanfiction is in the description. Chapter 55. One More Push to Freedom. Naruto returned to Tazuna's residence after meeting with Kato. To keep anything from escaping his notice, before leaving the dock, Naruto had secretly created 10 shadow clones and had them transform into dock workers and various inanimate objects. Their goal would be to keep track of Kato's movements and alert Naruto to any suspicious activity. He hoped they would find something soon. The longer it took to locate those kunoichi, the more likely it was they'd be broken. Tsunami had asked him if he would like to stay for dinner. Naruto would have said no, but then Tazuna and Inari had both told him that he should. While ignoring an old man like Tazuna was easy, there was no way Naruto could ignore Inari when he spoke with those vibrantly shining eyes, and so Naruto had sat around the dinner table and shared exaggerated stories of his exploits. "It seems like you've gotten into a lot of trouble these past few years," Tazuna said as he leaned back in his seat, rubbing his now full belly. "You're so cool, Ni-chan." Inari practically had stars in his eyes as he stared at Naruto. His eyes were practically glowing. Grinning as his chest swelled with pride and his ego grew to new heights, Naruto said, "Hey, that's nothing. Just the everyday life of Konoha's greatest ninja. So cool." While Inari was in awe, Tazuna rolled his eyes at Naruto's greatest ninja comment, while Tsunami giggled behind her hand. Dinner was basically finished now. Tsunami stood up to begin putting the dishes away, but Naruto created several clones and had them take the dishes. When the woman tried to protest, he had put on a smile and asked her to let his clones do it as a thank you for the wonderful meal. She had reluctantly agreed. The group adjourned to the living room while the clones were cleaning the dishes. They sat around the couches as Tsunami went and got her father a bottle of sake. She offered to pour some for Naruto, too, but he declined. Drinking was pointless when he couldn't even get drunk. "I see you're still an alcoholic. Now that's just rude." Tazuna took the sake saucer and glugged it down. Setting the saucer back on the coffee table, he glared at Naruto. "I no longer drink to excess. I just like to have something after dinner. If you say so." "I do say so, you little brat." The two shared a smile, though it went away as the brevity of the situation came crashing down, not that it could be helped. Naruto's reason for being here was pretty serious. Tazuna must have wanted to talk about what was going on. It was easy to sense the man's skepticism in his body language, the defensive posture and the frown he wore. They were both dead giveaways. "Are you sure Kato is the one responsible for kidnapping those kunoichi?" Tazuna leaned forward and pinned Naruto with a serious stare. "I mean, are you absolutely positive? I don't mean to place doubt on you, but that man has done a lot for this nation. I just can't see someone like him being involved in the slave trade." Naruto rubbed his chin as he thought of how best to answer. Meanwhile, Inari was looking back and forth between the two as Tsunami sat next to her father. Both of them seemed to understand the seriousness of this conversation, so they didn't say anything. In fact, Tsunami's expression was almost frightening in its intensity. "There's always a chance that I could be wrong," Naruto admitted. "However, as someone who controls the waterways, Kato is the most likely suspect. He has trade, access to places that no one else does, and I know there are a few countries he's trading with where slavery is actually legal. He is also the only lead I have. If he's not the one responsible, then it means I'm back at square one." "Well, I suppose that does make sense," Tazuna muttered as he took another drink of sake. He finished the saucer in one gulp. Tsunami faithfully refilled the saucer. "I still don't like it." Naruto shrugged. "There's not much I can do about that." Evening soon became night, and Tsunami asked Inari to help prepare Naruto's room. After getting a promise out of Naruto that they would play later, Inari went to help his mom, and then Naruto was shown to a small room about 6 tatami mats in size, which equaled about 9 meters. It didn't have any decorations, but there was a small dresser pressed against the wall, and the far end had a window facing the eastern side. This room would be one of the first that the sun reached when it rose tomorrow. Naruto spent the night in relative comfort. The futon was a far cry from his typical bed, which was soft enough to feel like he was sleeping on a cloud, but it was softer than his sleeping bag. He drifted into a comfortable slumber within minutes. When the sun rose the next morning, Naruto was well rested. Because of his lifestyle when traveling with Jiraiya, Naruto was used to getting up at the ass-crack of dawn. What's more, it was impossible for him to fall asleep once he woke up. This likely had to do with how Jiraiya used to attack him with water in the mornings. The man had said it was training to help Naruto sense impending attacks, but he was sure it was just the old man's way of playing a prank. With little to do except start his day, Naruto wandered outside and did some morning exercises. He couldn't do much. Since he didn't want to break anything, he didn't train his jutsu or use any of his more destructive taijutsu. He focused on calisthenics and light shadow sparring instead. It wasn't to improve his skills anything. Naruto couldn't improve most of his basic abilities any more than he already had. Everyone reached a plateau eventually, and his had been reached a while ago. Even so, while it was impossible to improve his basic abilities, Naruto could still keep his body limber and warmed up in the event that something came along which required his talents. Tsunami had woken up sometime while he was shadow sparring. He could see her in the kitchen window. The woman had noticed him and waved before getting started on breakfast. Inari had woken up not long after his mom. Unlike her, he had found Naruto sparring and opted to sit on the porch and watch. Naruto ignored the boy for now as he threw several straight jabs, which flowed into a series of high and low kicks. He kept his feet light. Rather than keeping them planted firmly on the ground, he bounced on the balls of his feet as he wove around the attacks of an invisible enemy. A light sweat broke out on his forehead, but his breathing was even. "You're so strong, Ni-chan. I'm really amazed. I wish I was that strong." The words had come after Naruto finished his warm-up exercises. He and Inari were sitting on the porch. Naruto had a towel around his neck to get rid of the slight sweat coating his skin, but it wasn't like he'd done anything that would work up a serious sweat. "What would you do if you were that strong?" asked Naruto. "I'd protect my family. What else?" "Hey, that's a good answer." Naruto ruffled Inari's hair as his Tsunami came outside and set a tray of tea on the porch, offering them a smile before quietly slipping back inside to finish breakfast. She really was a caring woman. He'd never met someone who could so easily cater to the needs of her family, and she always did it. With a smile. Looking at the rising sun as it climbed above the trees, Naruto thought about the strength he had acquired through years of training and hardship, and a series of unfortunate accidents that led to him becoming something other than human. You know, while being strong means you can protect your family, I think it's sometimes better not to be strong like this. Inari looked befuddled. "Why is that?" "Because," Naruto squinted his eyes as he searched for the right words, "because the strong only know how to destroy. It's easy for those with strength to destroy and subjugate those who are weaker than them. You don't do that," Inari pointed out. Naruto smiled. "Maybe I don't destroy the livelihoods of others, but I'm plenty destructive." He thought about all the missions he'd been on, all the property damage he'd caused during those times. Most of his techniques were destructive. The Rasengan, the Rasenshuriken, and his other Rasengan variants, his multitude of wind jutsu. There were so many techniques he had that indiscriminately destroyed whatever was in their path. Of course, it wasn't like he destroyed things on purpose. That was just the way life went. No one had ever really complained about it either, but he always felt bad when he saw how much people had to work to repair the damage one of his fights had caused. That was one of the reasons Naruto tried to fight opponents far away from civilization. No one cared if a few trees were destroyed. "But you're still a hero," Inari said. "I really look up to you, Ni-chan. You saved my mom and grandpa. So what if you're a little destructive? It doesn't change the fact that you've saved lots of people." Grinning, Naruto placed a hand on Inari's head again. I know. I'm not saying I regret what I do, or that I regret becoming stronger. I'm just saying that what you and old man Tazuna do are even greater than my own accomplishments. You guys build stuff. You create. I think that's worthy of praise." Inari didn't understand right now. While he wasn't much older than Naruto had been when he first became a ninja, Inari also hadn't grown up the same way. Yes, he'd been oppressed by Gato. However, in many ways, Inari was still a naive boy who hadn't experienced the horrors that ninja do. He'll understand when he grows up. "Hey, you two." Tsunami appeared in the entrance to the house. "Breakfast is ready. K. We'll be right there." Naruto and Inari joined Tsunami and Tazuna for a traditional breakfast of white rice, salmon, and pickled vegetables. It was the kind of home-cooked meal Naruto never got to experience at his apartment, not even when Temari was over, since neither of them were all that great at cooking. That was why he took extra care to savor every bite. Inari and Tazuna left soon after eating. They were currently working on a large-scale renovation project of some kind. According to Inari, they were rebuilding an old inn that had been abandoned during Gato's reign of terror. Their goal was to replace it with something better, though neither of them seemed to know whether it would remain an inn or become something else entirely. Naruto didn't have a whole lot he could do after they left, so he ended up sitting on the couch and meditating. His clones hadn't reported any suspicious activity back to him. According to the one that had dispelled last night, all Kato had done was speak with several of his workers, and then lock himself in his office. That meant either Kato was being exceedingly cautious, or they just hadn't found anything useful. Doubts crept into his mind as he wondered if maybe Tazuna was right. Could it be that he'd gotten it wrong and Kato really wasn't the one kidnapping Kunoichi? It wasn't impossible. At the same time, if it wasn't Kato, then who was it? Naruto would literally be back at square one if Kato wasn't the person responsible. Furthermore, he wouldn't have any more leads he could follow. Just as he was beginning to let his frustrations get the best of him, someone knocked on the door. "I'll get it," Tsunami called before Naruto could even stand up. The sound of her footsteps echoed down the hall and stopped. Naruto heard the door open. "Yes, can I help you?" "Oh, you have a message for Naruto." "Very well. I'll deliver it to him." Naruto blinked as the door closed again, and then Tsunami came into the living room with a letter in her hand. She seemed concerned. "A man in a business suit wanted me to give this to you." Tsunami handed Naruto a letter. There was nothing extravagant about it. The envelope was simple and unadorned with anything. Opening it, Naruto pulled out a small sheet of paper that had a simple note attached to it. The note read, "I believe I have located the person who kidnapped the Kunoichi. Please come to the docks post haste. Kato." Naruto frowned as he read the letter, wondering what was going on. His clones had not reported this, though they had admittedly been keeping their distance so as not to arouse suspicion. Was this being done to throw him off? Maybe. Naruto would have to proceed with caution. "It looks like I'm heading out." Naruto stood up. "I'm not sure when I'll be back, but if I'm not around by the time Inari and Tazuna get home, please tell them not to worry." "Okay," Tsunami said, wearing a small frown. "Be careful, Naruto. Don't worry about me." Naruto thumped his chest. "I'm the epitome of careful. I don't believe that for 1 second. Not many do. XOX. Because the mine that Akuma and the bandits had been using to reach Nadeshiko no Sato had been destroyed, Shizuka, Naruto's teammates, and the Kunoichi traveling with them had been forced to find an alternative route. Of course, there were several such routes they could use. According to the map Takiwa had acquired at the nearby village, there were several mines and tunnels that led through the mountain range. Each one was a bit further from Nami no Kuni than the first, but it wouldn't take more than a few extra hours to reach the island nation. The mine they were traveling through was a sloping tunnel that twisted and turned. The tunnels were small, the rock walls spiky and sharp. There was barely enough room for 2 people to walk shoulder to shoulder. Takiwa was in the lead. With the map in her hand, she determined which routes they would take. Shizuka and Tenten were immediately behind her, while Ino was in the center of their formation with the Nadeshiko Kunoichi. Choji was taking up the rear. As the largest of the group, he had the hardest time fitting in this tight space. Shizuka glanced at Tenten out of the corner of her eye. They hadn't spoken since that time on the wall. Should she talk to her? She didn't know. If she was being honest, Shizuka wasn't even sure she knew what she wanted from this girl. Naruto is unhappy because he can't make up with her. That was what it all came down to. Naruto, the person who had helped her renew her purpose and become stronger, was hurting. He wanted to make up with Tenten, but she wasn't letting him. Shizuka did not care about traditional conventions of love and marriage. Living in an all-Kunoichi village meant there'd been plenty of times where she and several women had shared each other's beds. Even after she and Naruto became intimate, that hadn't changed, and while she hadn't touched any of the woman's husbands, she knew that several of the other Kunoichi, Takiwa included, had threesomes with the men who'd been taken as husbands. Perhaps it was her own skewed sense of aesthetics. That made it impossible for her to get upset at Naruto's sexual activities with other women, but she honestly didn't see a problem. So long as he loved and supported her, she didn't care who he slept with. If she was being honest with herself, Shizuka was actually interested in adding Temari and Koyuki to hers and Naruto's nighttime activities. Maybe if the three of them tackled Naruto together, they could outlast him. That would be nice. I'd like to see what he looks like after he's been exhausted. Several hours passed in relative silence. The group soon emerged from the small tunnel, which widened into a room that seemed to be around the same size as a bedroom in Nadeshiko no Sato. It was round. Barren walls were bumpy and misshapen. When she looked up, all she found was a ceiling about 10 meters above their heads. It was dark enough that she could just barely make it out. We'll stop here and continue on after taking a break, Takiwa determined. We've got another day before we'll reach the end of this tunnel. They had already taken several breaks to eat and sleep. Shizuka had no idea how much time had passed, but according to Takiwa's internal clock, they had spent at least 3 days in this labyrinthine tunnel. Since the tunnel had numerous lateral passages and branched off several times, it was impossible to figure out which route you needed to take without a map. Even with the map, she was almost positive they'd become lost. The group sat around and quickly went about making camp, which meant creating a campfire and bringing out their sleeping bags. Several of the kunoichi made a basic meal for everyone. Then the groups went to sleep in shifts. Shizuka took the first watch. She stared at the fire as she sat with her legs crossed. The chances of them being attacked were slim, but she understood that it was better to be cautious on the off chance that something did happen. As she continued staring into the dancing flames, a figure sat down next to her. Couldn't sleep? She asked Tenten. I have a lot on my mind, the girl admitted. About our conversation the other day. Sort of. Tenten's cheeks turned pink. I was thinking about what you said, and I get it. I do. The thing is, I don't really know what I want from Naruto anymore. That's why I haven't been talking to him. Then maybe it's about time you figured out what kind of relationship you want, Shizuka suggested. If all you want is a friend, that's fine. If you want nothing to do with him, that's fine too. You just need to make up your mind. I think it's important to state your intentions clearly. Otherwise, all you are doing is needlessly hurting a good person. Yeah, I know. Tenten hugged her knees to her chest, looking more like a little girl than a mature young lady. It didn't seem like the girl knew what she wanted. In which case, how about I help you? Offered Shizuka. Looking up, Tenten studied her with a suspicious glint in her eyes. And how do you plan on doing that? Wearing a large smile, Shizuka explained her plan to Tenten, whose blush grew darker the longer she listened. The innocence displayed was actually pretty cute. It made Shizuka want to tease her, but she didn't. This was too important to ruin with teasing. What do you think? Asked Shizuka when she finished. Tenten averted her gaze. I don't know. It's that kind of half-assed attitude that put you in this situation in the first place. URK. Tenten made a strange choking noise as if she'd swallowed something down the wrong tube. She then gazed at Shizuka with a slightly frightened but mostly embarrassed look. Her eyes shook, but her face was turning into a mottled red. You might be right, but I really don't know if that's a good idea, though. Do you have any other ideas? Well, no. Then why not try mine? You have nothing to lose. Except my virginity. Yes, but you were planning on giving that up at some point anyway, right? Has anyone ever told you that you're a very blunt person? Takiwa has mentioned that I've become a lot more open in the last few years. Shizuka said nothing more as she waited for Tenten to make a choice. Much as she wanted to force the girl into this situation, she could not. What happened from here on out would have to be Tenten's choices. All she could do was offer this girl the one choice she believed had the highest chance of helping both her and Naruto reconcile. All right, a blushing Tenten finally said. We'll go with your plan. At those words, Shizuka brightened. I'll make sure you won't regret it. I somehow feel like I'm already regretting it, Tenten sighed as the fire continued to merrily crackle. XOX. Naruto arrived at the docks to discover that nothing looked like it had changed. There were still a lot of ships in port, a lot of people wandering around, and a lot of crates being loaded and offloaded various ships. He hadn't expected there to be any real difference. Still, it did unnerve him how nothing seemed to have changed at all. He made his way into the largest building on the dock, walked across the tiled lobby, and found the same woman he'd spoken to the previous day standing behind the desk. When she saw him, the woman's eyes lit up. "Naruto, sir. I'm glad you came." While he didn't know how he felt about being called sir, Naruto didn't let on to the strange squeamishness churning his gut. He tried to act naturally. "I received a letter saying Kato had some information for me. Yes. Please follow me. He'd like to speak with you in his office." Walking out from behind the desk, the woman, whose name was Angela, bade him to follow her. She walked through a door on the far side of the lobby. It led to a hallway. There were only a few doors in this hall, and none of them looked noteworthy. They were probably offices. The last door at the end was the one Angela led him to. She knocked once, waited for permission to enter, and then opened the door. "Sir, Naruto had arrived." "Thank you," said Kato. "Please send him in." At the invite, Naruto walked into the room, wary of any traps. The large office space was a lot bigger than he expected, but that might have also been due to how empty it was. A desk sat at the far end. A table sat in the middle. There were a few shelves with scrolls and books. However, aside from a couple of posters and maps decorating the wall, there really wasn't much. Kato stood by the table, leaning over it as he looked at a map that lay spread across the surface, hands pressed firmly against the hardwood. He looked surprisingly destitute. His shoulders had a slouch that Naruto didn't remember seeing last time. There were also bags under his eyes. He wondered if the man had gotten any sleep. "Naruto, I'm glad you came so promptly," Kato said as Angela left the room and shut the door behind her. "Considering your message, I couldn't not come quickly." "Yes, I suppose that is true." Naruto wandered over to the table and looked at the map, which was of the Kaikoku Sea and its surrounding nations. There were quite a few nations attached to the sea. Even parts of Hai no Kuni were connected to it. Aside from the map, several objects shaped like ships were sitting on the sea. They must have denoted the trade routes his vessels used. "Something like that. Your note mentioned you had discovered who you think is the kidnapper," Naruto prodded. "Yes." Kato sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "After you came to inform me about the kidnapped Kunoichi, I decided to run an inspection of the ships stationed in port. I called it a random inspection to check for structural integrity. However, while I was inspecting the ships, one of them left before my people could do an inspection of it. I checked the ship's cargo manifest, and the amount of crates that had been packed onto the ship didn't match up with what the manifest told me the ship was carrying." Naruto did remember a ship leaving port from his clone's memories, but he hadn't given it much thought at the time, assuming it was just a regular ship heading off to deliver goods. "Could that have been it? And you think this ship has the kidnapped Kunoichi?" he asked. "I believe so," Kato admitted. "Why else would he leave before I could inspect his ship if he didn't have something to hide?" "True enough." Naruto frowned as he tried to sense a lie in the man's words, only to find nothing but honesty. Even as he strained his five senses, he could find nothing. Kato's heartbeat was regular, his breathing and pulse were normal, and his eyesight was unwavering. He was either the best liar in the entire elemental nations, or he was telling the truth. "So, who is this person you think kidnapped the Kunoichi?" asked Naruto. "My half-brother, Shato." Naruto soon learned that Kato was the illegitimate child of Gato, who apparently had sired several such children from women he had raped and prostitutes he'd slept with. Kato was a child born from rape. Despite this, his mother had raised him with love and done her best to provide for him. When he grew up, Kato got a job working for a branch of Gato Company, rose to the ranks, and used the money he earned to help ease his mom's burden. After Gato died, Kato had used his intelligence and wit to take the reins of the company. Shato is another one of Gato's children. He was born from a prostitute that Gato slept with, but unlike me, he was abandoned by his mom. Kato's melancholic eyes told Naruto everything. "I found out that we were half-brothers and offered him a job because I felt a kinship with him, but Shato is a cruel man. There've been numerous infractions against him. I've been trying to change his ways, but I think I've finally realized that all I've done was enable him to commit more crimes. I am sorry for the trouble I've caused you." Realizing that his own estimation of this man had been wrong, Naruto shook his head. "Don't apologize. You tried to help someone you believed was family. I can't blame you for that." For now, let's just focus on stopping Shadow and rescuing those women. Do you know where he is heading? Kato bit his lip. Not quite. I know where he would be going if he follows his normal trade route, but he might change course to give me the slip. When did he leave? Over an hour ago. Which means he couldn't have gotten far. Naruto thought the situation through and tried to think about what the best method of finding out Shadow's location was. However, in the end, there was really only one option. Thank you for letting me know what's going on. Please leave the rest to me. Are you sure? I can offer my ships to help you find him, Kato offered. There's no need. Naruto gave the man his most confident grin as he thumped his chest. After all, I'm a one-man army. XOX. True to his words about being a one-man army, Naruto had sent out a literal army of shadow clones, over 10,000 in total, to discover the route that Shadow was taking. He didn't know how long it would take. That being the case, each shadow clone had enough chakra to last at least one day at sea, provided there were no storms or giant fish that ate people. He stood on the docks and looked out at the ocean. The line between ocean and sky was an easy one to see during the day, the gradient. Shift from a deep blue to a lighter hue plain as, well, plain as day. Naruto watched the waves as the salty breeze hit him in the face. Footsteps signaled someone's arrival, and Naruto turned around as Kato walked up to him. I've impounded all of the ships, Kato informed Naruto. No ship can exit the port until your mission is concluded. That should make it easier for you to find Shadow's vessel. Won't that mess with your schedule? It will, but I consider it a small price to pay. Kato stared at him with eyes that were nothing like his father's. This is also my fault for not keeping a closer eye on Shadow and allowing him to do as he pleases. I should have been more attentive, but I let my wish to help my family blind me to what he was doing. Suffering a hit to my company's reputation is a small price to pay for correcting my mistake. Those words made something unsettling twist Naruto's stomach into knots. He tried to ignore the feeling, but the more he did, the stronger it became. In the end, all he could do was sigh and relent. It appears my initial assumptions about you were incorrect. Naruto scratched his chin. When I first arrived in Nami no Kuni, Tazuna told me about who you were and what you had accomplished, and I immediately assumed you were the one responsible for kidnapping those kunoichi. I'm sorry for suspecting you. Kato shook his head. Pay it no mind. Were our situation reversed, I probably would have assumed the same thing. As they were talking, Angela came up and said several shipping captains were requesting an explanation from him as to why they weren't being allowed to leave. Kato sighed and told her that he'd be right along. He offered Naruto one last goodbye, and then departed to placate his captains. Not long after Kato left, one of Naruto's clones dispelled. He closed his eyes as several images came to him. He saw an alcove hidden on a small island. Retracing the route his clone took using the memories he gained, Naruto furrowed his brow when realized that it was the largest island outside of the Heron Bay. That meant he needed to travel north. Naruto created a clone and ordered it to inform Kato that he'd located Shadow and was leaving to rescue the kidnapped kunoichi. Then he took off. Rushing along the water's surface, he used wind chakra to boost his speed by creating a funnel behind him. His actions caused the water to quake as a large wake spread like a trail at his back. It took a long time to reach island. In truth, he had probably arrived earlier than anyone else could have, but it felt like hours had passed to him. When he reached the alcove, Naruto found another one of his clones crouching on the water's surface, staring into the inlet where the alcove was located. Has there been any change? Asked Naruto. None, boss. The clone shook his head. They haven't moved. Nodding, Naruto said, dispel yourself to alert the others that they should also dispel. Asu. With a cloud of smoke appearing around him, the clone dispelled. Seconds later, Naruto felt the memories of 10,000 clones hit him as the rest dispelled as well. He grimaced as a headache slammed into his forehead. Those damn clones should have known better than to dispel all at once. They must have been playing a prank on him. Stupid clones. Shaking his head to clear it, Naruto turned back toward the inlet, with its rocky cliff face and dangerous waters. This side of the island looked abandoned. That said, Naruto knew there was a village on the other side. A glance further down the inlet revealed the alcove. The large cave, which must have formed naturally over the course of eons, was big enough that Shadow's vessel, a massive cargo ship, was able to easily sit inside of it. Not only was the ship docked next to a naturally formed docking station that rose from the water's surface, but there were numerous pieces of loading equipment. As he watched, a massive crane sitting on the dock lowered into the ship. Naruto couldn't see what was happening, but several seconds later, the crane tilted up again. He narrowed his eyes when he saw the cage of naked women. It didn't take a genius to know those people were the slaves Shadow planned on selling. Whether or not those were the kidnapped kunoichi, he didn't know, but it honestly didn't matter. He planned on rescuing everyone. Using his godfather's transparency technique, Toten Jutsu, Naruto crept into the alcove, made his way to the ship, and then deactivated the jutsu. It was hard to use this in wall walk. The chakra from wall walking disrupted the technique. He placed his left foot on the ship's hull and channeled his chakra. Then placed his other foot on the hull. Now standing vertically, Naruto walked up the hull until he reached the edge, and then peered over the wall. Several dock workers were rushing to and fro, some carrying boxes while others simply barked out orders. Among the numerous people running every which way were two who seemed to merely be enjoying the atmosphere. The man was short, had a head of frizzy hair, and wore sunglasses despite being inside a cave. Like his father, he had the same evil-looking face. It was gaunt, making him appear older than he was. Naruto thought he looked exactly like his father, unlike Kato. His companion was a woman dressed in a white lab coat. She had a mousy appearance. Her messy brown hair was in disarray. Large wireframe glasses sat on her nose, though they kept slipping off, forcing her to readjust them. He couldn't see much of her face because she was turned at a 3/4 profile away from him, but it looked like she had a large nose and really small lips. "What do you think, Chisai?" asked Shadow. "That damn Kato caught onto us faster than I thought he would, but I think we managed to get away with a large enough haul. I would have liked to have acquired a few more kunoichi personally, but I suppose it can't be helped." The woman adjusted her glasses some more as the crane emerged from a cargo hold down below. Attached to the crane was another cage filled with women. "The ones we do have should be enough to further my research. And they will provide a hefty sum once they've been properly broken," Shadow added. "Yes." Naruto bit his lip as he wondered whether he should take them on now or wait. It was a pretty sure thing that Shadow wouldn't have anyone strong enough to take him on, that much was guaranteed. Hiring a ninja of Akuma's caliber would have been costly. Naruto had doubts that someone like this could hire another S-ranked ninja. At the same time, he didn't know what this man might have up his sleeve, and he might use the women he planned to sell as hostages. But if I can attack him fast enough. He shook his head. Even if Naruto managed to take down Shadow right now, he would still have to deal with the hired thugs. There were many on this ship, and there were even more on the docks. He didn't know how many more there were inside of the ship or further in the cave. For all he knew, there could have been thousands. My best option is to locate all of the women who've been kidnapped and rescue them first, or I could use my shadow clones to kill everyone first, but I don't know how many people are here. Deciding that rescuing the women was the best choice, Naruto made sure no one was looking at him, and then slipped on board. The first thing he would do was locate the kunoichi who had been kidnapped and request their aid, provided they were in condition to help him. Slipping through a door, Naruto traveled down a flight of stairs as he reactivated his sensei's transparency technique. None of the thugs wandering the halls noticed him as he traveled deeper into the ship. Most of them were in groups of at least two. He searched a bit more, traveling along numerous passages, until he spotted a thug entering a room. Naruto followed the man. The room he had entered was a bathroom. It was the communal kind that had several urinals and stalls. The thug Naruto had followed went up to a urinal, unzipped his pants, and began taking a leak. After making sure this person was the only one present, Naruto went up to the man, grabbed his hair, yanked his head back, and pressed a kunai to his throat. The man was still pissing, but Naruto didn't pay attention to that. What is? I'm sure you know how this works, Naruto said to the startled man. I am going to ask you several questions. You are going to give me several answers. If you don't tell me what I want, I'll slit your throat right here and now and find someone else. Do we have an understanding? Whoa, man, the thug said. There ain't no need for violence here. I gotcha. I'll tell ya whatever you need to know. Good. Naruto hid his smile and began his questioning. Several kunoichi were kidnapped recently. Where are they being held? In the lower levels of this ship. I heard they were being kept in a dungeon located near the bottom. And the other girls? They're all on the second level. I see. Thank you, Naruto said, and before the thug could react, Naruto snapped his neck. Stashing the man's body in one of the stalls and locking it, Naruto reactivated the transparency technique and made his way down to the lower levels. The hallways were small. Naruto ended up having to crawl on the ceiling to avoid running into people. Until he had rescued the women, Naruto couldn't afford to let anyone know he was there. Fortunately for him, this ship did not have any security beyond the thugs that wandered the halls. Sneaking into the lower levels was easy. He traveled down several flights of stairs before eventually finding the room that housed the kunoichi. It was a large room that looked similar to a medical facility. At least, it would have looked like one if it weren't for the cages lining the walls on the far side of the room. Several women were in the cages, ranging from their teens to their early 20s. As Naruto walked up and studied them, he saw that all of them had varying degrees of powerful muscles, meaning they were obviously the kunoichi. None of them responded to his presence other than to look up. Their eyes were cloudy and sightless. Have they been drugged? Are you girls from Nadeshiko no Sato? Naruto asked. No one answered him at first. They stared at him, blinking several times. He frowned as he waited for confirmation. Who are you? A voice asked behind him. Naruto turned around to find a woman strapped to a table. She was naked as the rest of them, but unlike them, her eyes were clear. I'm here on behalf of Shizuka to get all of you out of here, Naruto said. Shizuka. The woman's eyes widened at his words, and then widened further seconds later. Wait, you're Naruto Uzumaki. Yes, that's me. Huh, it's been so long, I almost didn't recognize you. Well, it's also pretty dark in here. Oh, shut up. Naruto didn't know who this woman was, but if she was from Nadeshiko no Sato, then she definitely would recognize him. He had lived there for several months during his training trip. The relationship between him and Shizuka was also well known in the village. Let me get you out of this. Unsealing a kunai, Naruto sliced through the bonds keeping the woman in place with wind chakra. Once free, the woman climbed off the table and rubbed her red and blistered wrists. Damn, those jerks weren't gentle when they bound me. Motherfuckers. Are these all the kunoichi? Yeah, they didn't take any of us outside of this room. I suspect they don't plan on letting us leave this prison until they've broken us. Fortunately, their mind-breaking drug hasn't been perfected yet. Is that why these kunoichi are acting so docile? Nah, that's just an act. The kunoichi clapped her hands together. All right, ladies. It looks like we're gonna be making our escape. Look alive. As if those words had been a magic signal, the women in the cages all stood up, eyes returning to a more vibrant state. Naruto realized they'd just been putting up a front. They had probably done so to make them seem harmless in front of their captors. Being a ninja meant deceiving your enemies. After pulling a scroll from his ninja pouch, Naruto set it on the ground and unfurled it. Black symbols and lines ran along the surface. He placed his hands on the seal and channeled his chakra. The area was engulfed in smoke barely a second later, and when the smoke cleared, there was a large pile of women's clothing lying on the ground. You ladies should get dressed, Naruto said as he stood up. The kunoichi who'd been strapped to the table raised an eyebrow. Do you always carry around women's clothing with you? Yes, Naruto answered without inflection. Ever since I began busting slave trading operations, I've taken to carrying women's clothing. It's much easier to maintain a disguise than it is a transformation, especially since getting yourself captured involves letting them knock you out. Jutsu like the transformation technique always dispelled when someone was knocked unconscious. That was why, whenever Naruto infiltrated a slave operation, he used a combination of makeup, women's clothing, fake breasts made from molding, and a special type of underwear that hid his junk to fool people into believing he was a woman. You are a man without shame, the kunoichi said as she grabbed hip-hugging pants and a dark shirt. She slid into the pants, foregoing underwear, and then put the shirt on. Naruto shrugged as the other kunoichi began getting dressed. Shame has no place in the life of a shinobi. Hey, true. Naruto learned that the kunoichi's name was Mai Shiranui. She was a busty blonde woman who specialized in Tai ninjutsu, a type of close-range combat that focused on body-enhancing ninjutsu to increase her taijutsu capabilities. Her body also had a unique constitution that allowed her to resist and flush out various drugs and poisons, which explained why she let those people drug her. She'd probably pissed them off so they would try to break her first. With the kunoichi all freed, Naruto created a simple plan that would allow them to hasten the completion of this mission. The kunoichi would rescue all the women aboard this ship, kill anyone who stood in their way, and assume command of the vessel. Meanwhile, Naruto would confront Shato and Chisai, rescue the rest of the women who'd been captured, and dispose of any thugs wandering outside of the ship. Their plans made, the group quickly left the prison behind them and got moving. XOX. Naruto split off from the kunoichi and made his way up. Since he no longer had to worry about being caught, he didn't hesitate to kill anyone standing in his path. He created numerous shadow clones, made them split up, and had them kill every thug they came across before the alarm could be sounded. The kunoichi would be doing the same. Once Naruto reached the deck, he created several more clones and had them all use the transparency technique to sneak up behind the people up top. As one, they killed the workers, crushing their throats, and then sealing the bodies inside of a scroll. After that, all of the Naruto clones dropped their jutsu and used the transformation technique to transform into whoever they had killed. While this was going on, the real Naruto, still under a transparency jutsu, snuck off the ship and onto the deck. He ignored the guards walking across the natural stone platform emerging from the water's surface and used his abilities at stealth to sneak past them. No one seemed to have realized something was wrong. The thugs continued working, though some of them were ogling and taunting the naked women in cages. From the embarrassed shrieks and crying, these women were not kunoichi but regular civilians. This alcove had several passages leading deeper into the island. He walked through one of the passages. Without any idea of where Chisai and Shato were, all Naruto could do was wander the rocky passages, which were surprisingly flat, in search of them. To aid in his cause, he once more created several shadow clones and had them do reconnaissance. This cavernous hideout was a lot bigger than he first thought. Some of the passages sloped up, while others went down, and even more twisted and turned like a pretzel. There were more passages than he could count, and it seemed to him like this place might run through most of the island. One of his clones finally found Shato and Chisai. Naruto used the clones' memories to follow the correct passages, which led into a massive prison that seemed to second as a torture chamber. Naruto peeled his lips back in disgust as he saw several battered women chained to a wall. He clenched his fists when he noticed the dull, lifeless look in their eyes. Numerous devices hung from racks, all of which he recognized due to his exposure to them before. Aside from devices designed to torture, there were also numerous sex toys. While the torture devices were for breaking people with pain, the sex toys were for breaking them with pleasure, like a carrot and a stick. Chisai and Shato were inside. They stood beside a vertical table that currently held a screaming, struggling woman. Chisai had a syringe in her hand and was preparing to plunge the needle into the woman's arm. Naruto appeared behind her swifter than the wind. Before either of them even realized he was there, Naruto broke the woman's neck. As she crumbled to the ground, Shato turned around in shock, and in that moment, Naruto unsealed his kunai, slammed the man into the ground, pinned Shato's hands with his knees, and held the kunai against his throat. "Hello, Shato." Naruto smiled. "Pleasant evening, isn't it? Who the fuck are you?" Shato tried to put on a brave face, but Naruto punched him in the nose hard enough to break it. As the man cried out, Naruto clicked his tongue. "You are not the one asking the questions here. I am." Naruto leaned in close enough that Shato could see his glaring blue eyes. "You are going to tell me everything about your operation. Fuck you." Naruto almost sighed at this man's bluster. For whatever reason, every slave trader he'd killed had reacted the same way when confronted with a similar situation. They denied talking at first, either out of some misguided belief in their own safety or because they were just dumb, but once Naruto brought on the pain, they would sing like a bird. And that was what he decided to do. Naruto didn't have the patience to waste time with pleasantries. "Why do you evil slaver types always make things so difficult for me?" It was a rhetorical question. Naruto wasn't going to give this man time to answer. Prying the man's mouth open, Naruto placed several Senbon needles inside and used chakra to keep them in place. If the man closed his mouth, those Senbon would stab him, which he made sure to inform Shato of. The man's eyes widened as a cold sweat broke out on his forehead. However, he had no time to say anything, not that he could with his mouth open so wide, since Naruto had already reached in, grabbed one of his teeth, and yanked. Ah! Chucking away the tooth, Naruto watched as Shadow tried to squirm around underneath him. Naruto was still pinning the man to the floor, so he couldn't move, but he did wiggle a lot. Of course, after yelling, Shadow instinctively closed his mouth, which caused the Senbon to pierce his fleshy pink insides. That in turn caused him to scream again. Naruto waited out the man's screaming and thrash. Once Shadow settled down, he pried the man's mouth open once more and pulled the Senbon out. Shadow wouldn't be able to talk if he had those inside of him. Tossing the Senbon away, he looked at the pathetically crying man again. I'm only going to say this one more time. If you do not tell me everything about your operation here, then I'll just torture you until your mind breaks and you plead with me to kill you. All right, all right. Tears drizzling down Shadow's eyes, the man gave in a lot more quickly than most others. He probably wasn't used to pain. I'll tell you everything I know. Just please stop. Thus began the interrogation. Naruto learned that this was not Shadow's only slaving operation. He had several more located throughout the elemental nations. This one was actually relatively new. He'd set up shop in Nami no Kuni, a daring move considering Nami shipping was headquartered there, and began his operation to capture and sell kunoichi as slaves. There was apparently a high demand for kunoichi among the nobles of nations that had no ninja village. Naruto kept that in mind for the future. Once Naruto had acquired all of the information he could, he knocked Shadow out. This was done mostly out of consideration for the woman who was even now staring at him in horror. She couldn't have been older than 20 or so. She might be even younger than that. And she had already seen one death plus this torture session. He didn't want to scar her any more than he already had. I should have knocked these two out and let this girl go before torturing them both. That was his bad. He'd let his emotions get the best of him. Standing up, Naruto stepped in front of the girl, who tried to squirm away from him. He sighed but didn't let her actions hurt him. She was just scared. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, he began. I'm here to rescue you and the other women who were kidnapped. The woman stopped. She couldn't say anything because she had a ball gag in her mouth, but she was no longer struggling to escape from his gaze. I'm going to take that off of you. He gestured to the gag. Is that okay? The woman nodded, and Naruto reached behind her to undo the latch that kept the gag in place, and then slowly, careful not to hurt her, pulled the gag away from her mouth. With the gag no longer in place, the woman's jaw was finally able to relax, though it seemed to have been so long since it was removed that her jaw refused to close. Naruto unsealed a towel and used it to wipe the drool that had trailed down her chin, neck, and chest. The woman blushed but didn't stop him. Once that was done, he began undoing the straps on her legs. Mind if I ask your name? Lana, the girl spoke with a slight lisp. He assumed her ability to speak was hampered by how her jaw muscles had suffered thanks to the ball gag. Lana. That's a nice name. Thank you. It was always awkward talking to kidnapped women because you never knew what to say, but Naruto tried his best to ease her mind with conversation as, upon finishing the straps around her legs, he undid her hands. Turned out Lana was from a village on the opposite end of the elemental nations. She'd been kidnapped about 2 months ago. They had left her and several other girls in this cave to rot and had only just begun to try and break her. She was incredibly lucky. Because she'd been stuck in that position for several hours, her legs wouldn't respond as she wanted them to. Once Naruto released her, she pitched forward into his chest, but he caught her and quickly unsealed a blanket to cover her modesty. He then created several shadow clones and had them begin releasing the woman chained to the walls. The girl began. What is it? Thank you, for saving me. You're welcome. Picking up the girl in a princess carry, Naruto began walking back toward the dock. His clones and the Nadeshiko Kunoichi should have finished taking care of the bandits by now. XOX. It took about 1 hour to completely subdue all of the thugs and rescue the women. Speaking of, there were 265 women in total, all of them ranging from their early adult years to their late teens. The group that had been on board the vessel, 61 in total, had only been a small portion of the women who'd been kidnapped. Naruto and Mai found the rest trapped inside of an underground prison. The girl who Naruto had personally rescued had fallen asleep several minutes after he picked her up, so Naruto had placed her inside of one of the rooms on the ship. Then he, Mai, and the other Nadeshiko Kunoichi had the rest of the women board as well. While some of them were skeptical and reluctant at first, Naruto promised that they were all going back home. Shato's ship was a steamship, a powerful cargo freighter that ran on steam power instead of merely relying on the ocean breeze and sails. It shaved off the distance between them and Nami no Kuni in a matter of hours. The hour was still late when they arrived at the dock. The evening sun was slowly disappearing behind the ocean. Even so, several dock workers greeted Naruto when he emerged from the ship. "Please inform Kato that I have rescued the girls Shato kidnapped," Naruto said to one of the workers, a burly man with thick arms that were covered in hair and a beard that made him think of a lumberjack. He looked almost like a bear. "We'll do that." Kato said to let him know when you returned anyway. "I see. He also asked me to pass on a message for when you got back." "What's the message?" "He said to tell you that Shizuka and your team are at Tazuna's house, and that you should head over there as soon as you can." "Thanks. I guess I'll do that." Naruto paused as he looked back at the ship. Several sets of eyes were peeking out over the side. They were the civilian women he'd rescued. Naruto turned back at the man who looked like he would be more at home in the mountains. "What about the women I rescued?" "We'll have them stay on the ship for now." The man scratched his beard. "We don't have any accommodations ready that can house so many people." "I'm sure Kato will figure something out once he's made aware of the problem." "I understand. Thank you." The bear-like man left with a nod, and Naruto spoke with Mai Shiranui about what they should do. Of course, Mai had said she was going with him to meet with Shizuka, but they couldn't leave these women alone. Only Mai would come with him. It was decided that the rest would stay with the girls and protect them, just in case. While he didn't think Kato would follow in his half-brother's footsteps, there was nothing wrong with being safe. Naruto returned to Tazuna's house to find Tsunami entertaining Shizuka, Ino, Tenten, Choji, Takiwa, and a group of Nadeshiko Kunoichi. There were 8 people in total. The living room was fairly cramped, with the seats being filled by the members of his team and the Kunoichi. Poor Tazuna was grumbling as he stood off to the side with his arms crossed. "My!" Shizuka leapt to her feet and raced for the woman, who returned her leader's enthusiastic greeting with a smile. "It's good to see you, Shizuka. I'm sorry for allowing myself to be kidnapped. I have no excuse." "What are you saying? It was my fault you got kidnapped in the first place. I should have never sent you and your team out on that mission once it was made clear that someone was after us. Please forgive me." No, it was an important mission. Our job was to figure out who was after us, but instead myself and my squad failed." While the conversation between Mai and Shizuka went on, though it seemed like the two were mutually apologizing to each other instead of having an actual conversation, Naruto went over to the couch where his team sat. Ino, Tenten, and Choji looked up at his approach. A sly grin appeared on his fellow blonde's face. "It looks like you really did end up completing the mission without us." Naruto shrugged. "I had planned on waiting for you to arrive, but then the person who kidnapped all those Kunoichi caught wind of what I was doing and left. I didn't have much choice but to follow them and take care of the situation myself." "A likely excuse. Maybe you should tell us what happened," Choji suggested as he munched on some rice crackers, obviously provided by Tsunami, who'd gone back into the kitchen. Naruto agreed with Choji and informed them of everything that had transpired after he arrived in Nami no Kuni, from his meeting with Kato to his rescue of the Kunoichi. He paid careful attention to Ino and Tenten. Both of them looked ready to puke at certain parts. They were more than a little green, especially when he got to the part about the girl he'd rescued from Shato and Chisai. He didn't blame them for being sickened. As someone who'd become adept at breaking up slave trading operations, Naruto had learned about humanity's darkness, about the depravity some humans went to. It made him remember Akane's scornful words about humanity. He actually agreed with her. The conversation between Mai and Shizuka continued for nearly an hour as Mai informed her leader about everything that happened to her and her squad. Shizuka had nearly made her palms bleed. She was clenching her fists so hard at some points. She'd taken the part where Mai had been injected with mind-breaking drugs quite hard. Ino, Tenten, and Choji weren't much better. Tazuna, who'd heard the whole conversation, had mumbled that it was a good thing Inari was asleep. Naruto agreed. This wasn't something a kid like him needed to hear. As the conversation wound to a close, Tsunami, who had emerged from the kitchen with some tea during their story, clapped her hands to get their attention. Do you ladies have a place to stay? If not, I would love it if you stayed here. There is more than enough room. We have yet to find any accommodations, Shizuka admitted. Finding Naruto was our priority, so we went searching for a place to stay night, but are you sure it's alright to house us? There are quite a few of us. Oh, yes. We have 6 guest bedrooms, so there is more than enough room for everyone. In that case, we will gladly accept your offer. Dividing up the rooms took longer than Naruto thought it should have. At first, he and Choji were going to share a room since they were both guys, while the Nadeshiko Kunoichi would share another room, and the Konoha Kunoichi would also share a room. However, Shizuka had protested. She stated that she wished to share a room with Naruto. Her words had surprised Tsunami, but the calm woman had accepted them with a smile, though she'd also given Naruto a speculative gleam that he didn't quite appreciate. In either event, Choji would get his own room, while Naruto and Shizuka would share a room. He thought it odd that she was so adamant. When he asked her why she was doing this, however, she merely smiled and said she wanted to sleep with him. He would have let it go at that, but she'd glanced at someone else after she finished. I sense trouble on the horizon. A freshly showered Naruto entered his room about 1 hour after the decision on sleeping arrangements had been made. There was only one shower. He'd let the girls take one first. As he shut the door behind him, Naruto turned back to the interior of the room, and paused. Tenten, what are you doing here? Tenten and Shizuka were sitting on a large futon, dressed only in a thin white robe. The robe seemed a bit big for them. Part of it slipped down their shoulders, revealing unblemished skin. Their skin, a healthy pink from the hot bath they had taken, glistened under the light as they sat there, feet tucked underneath their bums, hands resting on their laps. Tenten fidgeted as Naruto stared at her. She seemed embarrassed. Shizuka spoke for them both. Forgive me for meddling in your affairs, but I decided to speak with Tenten on your behalf. She and I have reached an understanding. That is why she is here. An understanding, huh? Naruto forced his nerves to remain calm as he walked into the room and sat on the futon. It was large enough that all 3 of them could form a triangle with about half a meter of space between them. What kind of understanding did you reach? Tenten does not know what she wants from you, so in order to find out, I have offered to help her seduce you. Naruto nodded several times. That makes sense. Wait. What? He must have heard wrong. Yes, that was it. He had obviously heard wrong. There was absolutely no way he could have heard her right. But Shizuka gazed at him with an impassive and serious expression. Meanwhile, the healthy blush on Tenten's cheeks had grown immeasurably darker. You heard me. She and I are going to seduce you. Naruto needed a moment to process this new information. His brain felt like it had been fried by a fire jutsu. So, you plan on seducing me? And you're okay with this? His question was directed at Tenten, whose face had become so red she looked like a boiled lobster. She looked down at her thighs, which she rubbed together, and then nodded with the slowness of a turtle. Shizuka talked about it, and she said the reason I can't figure out what to do is because I don't know what I want. She said sleeping with you might help me come to a decision. Naruto stared at Shizuka, who only smiled at him with a perfect poker face. He couldn't figure out what she was thinking. That being the case, he looked back at Tenten, who peeked at him from beneath her fringe of hair. If this is what you want, then I don't mind, but are you sure you won't regret this? Why yes. Tenten looked back down. I thought about it, and I think she's right. I'd like to know what I want, and I think the best way is by being intimate with you. If he was being honest, Naruto didn't really understand it, but he did know that intimacy often let people understand things about another person that they couldn't figure out just by knowing them normally. He likened it to fighting. When 2 powerful warriors fought, they could understand each other through their fists. In this case, when 2 people had sex, they understood each other through the connection such an act formed. He guessed this was something like that. So long as it is something you're okay with, Naruto said. Tenten merely nodded. While the 2 of them stared at anything but each other, Shizuka moved behind Tenten until she was able to wrap her arms around the girl's middle. While Tenten squawked, The Nadeshiko no Sato leader smiled at Naruto, her eyes brimming with an effervescent sheen. Since we've agreed to this now, why don't you start off with a nice kiss? No, but that's not. Tenten tried to speak, but Naruto knew they had to start somewhere, so he crawled toward them on all fours, until he was right in front of Tenten's face, and leaned forward. When he pressed their lips together, Tenten went silent. Naruto kept his mouth over hers for several long seconds. He frowned when she didn't return the kiss. He pulled back. Are you okay, Ten-chan? Huh. Oh, yeah, I'm, great. Are you really sure you're okay with this? You can back out if you want to. Why wouldn't I be? You're not kissing back. That's just because I'm so surprised. Give me some warning before you do something like that. You already knew what was going to happen. Don't act like you didn't have ample time to react. Naruto didn't say his thoughts out loud because he knew it wouldn't matter. Women could be quite illogical when they wanted to be. Then, is it okay if I kiss you now? Asked Naruto. Tenten shifted her eyes away from him, but she still nodded. Oh okay. With her permission, Naruto leaned forward and pressed their lips together once more. Despite telling him it was okay, Tenten clearly had no idea what to do. Well, that made sense. It wasn't like she'd ever kissed anyone. Naruto decided to take the lead, nibbling on her lower lip before switching to her upper lip. A delicate sound escaped her mouth. Her lips parted. Naruto could have chosen to slip his tongue inside of her mouth, but he didn't think she was ready for such an act. That said, he did dip his tongue briefly into her mouth to caress her tongue. Before the kiss could get too intense, Shizuka, still behind Tenten, pulled the girl back. The weapon user was already breathing as though she'd run 100 kilometers with Rock Lee and made a guy. Her shoulders heaved and the robe she wore had slipped off to reveal more of her lightly tanned skin. I think we should switch tactics here, Shizuka said with a smile. We can't have you neglecting one of us in favor of the other. Naruto would have questioned her about letting Tenten sleep with him then, but he also realized that she did have a point. He couldn't just please one of them. Still, this problem could be solved with a simple shadow clone jutsu. And no, you cannot create shadow clones. Damn it. Before Naruto could fully relinquish his thoughts of using the shadow clone jutsu for sex, Shizuka slipped past Tenten and engaged Naruto in a fierce dueling of tongues. He barely had time to squawk before she pushed his back onto the futon and plundered his mouth. She quickly worked the knots of his robe, undoing them and pushing it apart. Seconds after the chilly night air hit his bare skin, Naruto felt a delicate hand rub his crotch over the boxers he was wearing. He recognized Shizuka's touch. His flaccid cock soon rose at the feeling of her delicate and skilled fingers. There's a good boy. I love how you can get your soldier to stand at attention so quickly. I don't do anything. He has a mind of his own. That's so. I guess I should be glad he's so reactive then. Shizuka peeled Naruto's boxers off, tossed them aside, and then placed her hands on the thick, meaty shaft. Naruto sucked in a breath. Her hands weren't cold, but compared to the heat radiating from his dick, they were like ice. It was a strangely pleasant contrast that sent shivers up and down his spine. Hello there, Shizuka cooed as she rubbed her cheek against Naruto's dick. Did you miss me? Naruto wanted to make a snappy comeback, but then Shizuka kissed him, and all words he could have possibly said fled his mind like water evaporating from a fire jutsu. His mind was further hampered from thinking when Shizuka opened her mouth and slowly took him inside of her. The warmth and wetness of her mouth made him grit his teeth. Matters weren't helped when she pressed her tongue against the underside of his shaft and dragged it along his skin. He grabbed the bedsheets and tried to resist bucking his hips. The last time he did that, Shizuka had nearly choked because she couldn't fit all of him inside of her. While Shizuka was orally pleasing him, Tenten had remained rooted to the spot. It seemed she didn't know what to do. All she could do was stare at the spectacle taking place before her with wide eyes. Yet even though her mind seemed frozen, her hands seemed to move with a mind of their own. They were buried between her thighs. SLLRRRPPP. A loud, wet-sucking sound echoed around the room as Shizuka released his cock. The cool air hit his wet member, causing him to shiver. With a grin, the young village leader looked at Tenten. What are you doing? Come over here. Tenten still seemed unsure, but she still crawled to where Shizuka was, kneeling down alongside her. You've never done this before, right? Asked Shizuka. Oh, of course I haven't. Right. So, just follow my lead. Since there are two of us, rather than taking the whole thing in our mouths, we're going to lick it. Lick it. Like a lollipop. Come on. Just do what I do. Ah. Naruto had been watching the surreal scene with a sense of wonder, but when Shizuka pressed the flat end of her tongue against him and dragged it from the base of his shaft to the tip of his head, he threw his head back and tried not to let the sensation overwhelm him. Her tongue was warm and soft. She licked him just like she said she would, like he was a lollipop. Come on, Tenten. Are you just going to stand there like a lemon? Hurry up. Alright. So, I do it, like this. Just like that. A completely different sensation from Shizuka's bold display raced through him as Tenten, leaning down, pressed just the tip of her tongue to him and gave an experimental lick. She pulled back for a second. The expression on her face was bizarre. It was like she had tasted a food so foreign she had no way to quantify it. However, after another moment had passed, she leaned back down and licked him again. That's good. Just keep doing that. Shizuka tucked a strand of hair behind her ear as she leaned over. And now, I'm going to join you. Naruto could feel his body pulsing as Shizuka joined Tenten in licking him. Their hot breath washed over his cock as their soft tongues lathered him in saliva. He could barely breathe as the combination of their hot breath and wet tongues mixed with the cool air to enhance the feelings running through him. It wasn't long before he felt the telltale tightening of his balls that signified his impending release. Ha, you too, I'm about to come. As if those were the words she'd been waiting for, Shizuka fondled his balls while taking his head in her mouth and sucking on it. Naruto released a shout as he unloaded his spunk into Shizuka. Her cheeks bulged a bit because there was so much, and several trails dribbled from her mouth. She quickly swallowed everything he released and cleaned off her face. You still taste incredibly salty, Shizuka murmured. You've been eating more ramen, haven't you? I can't help it, our ramen is the best. I think I'm gonna put you on a diet of fruit for a while. Anything but that, please. While Shizuka teased Naruto, Tenten stared at the girl with something akin to astonishment. You just drank his sperm. Of course I did. Shizuka smiled. It's high in protein, and even if it's a little salty, it still tastes good. Does it really? Shizuka fixed half-lidded eyes on Tenten. Would you like to find out for yourself? No thanks. Tenten turned her head. Fair enough. Now then, it looks like Naruto is still harder than an earth jutsu. What should we? Oh. I know. Tenten, let's do this. Do what? Hey, what are you doing? Naruto was still lying on his back when Shizuka grabbed Tenten and pulled her over to him. He blinked as her panty-covered crotch suddenly sprang into view directly above him. Tenten's panties were white. They were also damp. He could see the outline of her lips as the wet and semi-translucent fabric clung to her. The sight made his dick twitch. You know what to do, Naruto, Shizuka said as she went back to his crotch. What to do? What do you, on? Naruto. What are you doing? Returning the favor, was all Naruto said before he pressed his mouth against Tenten's panties and kissed her lips through them. Tenten's entire body seemed to shudder. Naruto's nose, which was buried in Tenten's butt as she pushed against him, wiggled as she shook her hips. Wait. I'm not ready, on. Yan. A pair of soft hands landed on his stomach. They were calloused and strong from years of weapons training. His abs twitched at the feeling, but there were two more prominent sensations running through him. The first was the taste of Tenten on his tongue and the feeling of her quivering lips through her panties, and the second was the feeling of his soaked in saliva dick being encased between two soft, round marshmallows. He didn't have to look to know that Shizuka had wrapped his cock in her tits. The feeling of his dick gliding through her breasts was unmistakable, as was the intense pleasure her actions gave him. Tenten's cries grew louder as Naruto moaned around her cunt, unable to keep quiet thanks to Shizuka. Deciding that he needed to up his game, he pulled Tenten's panties to the side and attacked her directly. She was already soaking wet, with light, glistening trails running down her inner thighs. Her juices flowed into his mouth as lapped at her lips with his tongue. Of course, simply licking her wasn't going to do anything, so Naruto peeled her lips apart and inserted a finger, and then he extended his tongue and began stimulating her clit. Nya. Naruto. Don't touch the Aaaaattt. It's very sensitive, Hyan. As Tenten's juices exploded against his mouth and tongue, Shizuka had taken his head into her mouth and was sucking on it as she rubbed the rest of him with her breasts. Naruto was finding it hard to concentrate with her doing that. He gave himself over to instincts and continued stimulating Tenten with his mouth. And no. This sensation is, my mind, going blank. Can't. On. Ah. Ah. Tenten's end came seconds later when her entire body suddenly tightened. Her thighs, which rested on either side of Naruto's head, suddenly clamped together as she pushed her ass and pussy against his face. Naruto struggled to breathe as the love nectar's flow suddenly became a deluge. At the same time, his own impending release came quickly as he lost control over his body. Pua. Huff. Huff. Naruto was able to finally pry his head free from Tenten's ridiculously strong glutes after the girl had slumped over. He could see the ceiling now, though when he raised his head to look past him, all he saw were Tenten's quivering thighs, ass, and nether lips. Her juices were flowing from her twitching pussy and creating wet trails on his chest. I'd say she's ready to receive you, Shizuka mumbled. Wouldn't you agree, Naruto? Despite having already come twice, Naruto was still hard. Nodding, he grabbed Tenten's thighs and slowly rolled her off him. The girl was practically boneless as she flopped onto her back. As Naruto crawled up, he glanced at the girl and noticed that her eyes were glazed and her slack mouth had drool leaking from it. Her robe was also open enough that he could see her nipples peeking out. Naruto wiped his mouth and crawled between Tenten's legs. He didn't touch her with his member yet. Leaning over, he tilted her head until her glazed eyes were gazing into his and placed several pecks on her lips. Naruto. Are you okay? I feel really good. Naruto almost snorted at the dumbstruck reply. I can make you feel even better if you want. May I? Tenten blinked several times, seemingly coming down from her pleasure-induced high. She stared at him for a second. He wondered if she was wondering what he could do that would feel better than what he had just done. Then she nodded. Oh okay. Please be gentle. I will. Grabbing her panties, Naruto slid the soaking wet undergarments down her legs. He lifted her left thigh, pulled her foot out of the hole, and then did the same to her right. Afterward, he repositioned her legs and placed his cock against her lips, admiring the way her entrance parted as he rubbed his shaft along her. Tenten released a soft moan-like sigh as her toes clenched from his actions. Naruto, Shizuka said. I think it's time. Right. Lining himself up, Naruto began pushing his dick into Tenten's pussy. He winced as he met resistance. She was a lot tighter than Shizuka. Tenten groaned in discomfort as he continued pressing forward, until he finally came upon her hymen. He hadn't expected it. Most kunoichi lost their hymens thanks to the rigorous training they did. Tenten, Naruto said, this will hurt a bit. Please bear with it. Oh okay. I'll do my best. Naruto retracted his dick just a bit, and then, with a swift thrust, broke through her hymen and fully sheathed himself inside of her. Tenten cried out. Tears leaked from the corner of her eyes. Naruto wanted to lean over and wipe them away, but he was afraid that moving would make her feel more pain. Fortunately, Shizuka was there. She stroked Tenten's cheeks with her hand and kissed away the tears. You did a good job, she said. Tenten groaned. I knew it would hurt, but I didn't expect that. Naruto is a bit bigger than some men, and you're a virgin, so it probably hurt more. But you did a great job. Did I? Tenten looked from Shizuka to Naruto. He nodded. You did. Also, let me know when I can begin moving. It was actually hard for him right now. Tenten's walls were clamping around him so tightly it felt like he was being strangled. He wanted to begin moving to loosen her up, but he refused to move until she gave the okay. You can move now, Tenten said as she closed her eyes. I'm ready. Okay then. Here I go. A loud sucking sound lewdly echoed around the room as Naruto pulled himself out of Tenten. It felt like her pussy was trying to suck him back inside. Tenten's discomforting groan mixed in with the noise as Naruto pulled back until just his head was inside of her, and then, just as slowly as he pulled out, he pushed himself back in. He repeated the process, hoping it would eventually become easier. How do you feel? He asked Tenten. I feel better. Ha. Tenten released several slow, deep pants. It's beginning to feel good. I feel like like you're filling me up. There's this electric sensation running through my body, and it's so good. Good. That's how it's supposed to feel. As he moved in and out of Tenten at a snail's pace, Naruto was vaguely reminded of the term, sawing logs. He knew that meant sleeping, but he was moving so slowly, sawing his log in and out of Tenten, that he couldn't help but think of the phrase. It almost made him giggle. Now that we've got a good mood going again, I think it's time I joined in, Shizuka said as she leaned down and pushed Tenten's robe apart. Ah. Tenten's breathing stilted as Shizuka tongued her nipple, flicking it back and forth. After swirling her tongue around it, she lightly bit on it, and then tugged. Tenten released a loud, ooh. Naruto, who had a more or less front row seat as he slowly sawed his log in and out of Tenten's passage, witnessed Shizuka as she coated the girl's hardened nipple in saliva before taking into her mouth. Ah. Ha. No. Don't do that. It feels weird. There was no telling if Tenten's protests meant she was unwilling or not. Her hand was already pressed against Shizuka's head, pushing the other girl down as though asking her to keep doing what she was doing. While Shizuka played with Tenten's tits using her mouth, she pleasured herself. Burying her hand between her legs, Shizuka moaned around the nipple in her mouth as she fingered herself. Naruto couldn't see it all, but he could practically hear the lewd sucking sounds as she shoved her fingers into her sopping center. By this point, Tenten had loosened enough that he could move faster. He increased the speed of his thrusts. However, he couldn't really pound her like he did with Temari or Shizuka. Her pussy really was tighter, almost uncomfortably so. He kept his pace even, though, which seemed to work for Tenten just fine. HGNN. My mind is going blank. I can't think. It feels so good. Tenten's hips bucked as Naruto plunged into her depths, rubbing against her cervix and knocking on her womb. Oh. I can't take this. I'm gonna come. Naruto actually had to stop moving, or rather, he found himself unable to move when Tenten suddenly clamped down on him to the point where it simply became impossible. He gritted his teeth and wrote out Tenten's orgasm. It was hard, especially because Shizuka had switched from playing with Tenten's breasts to making out with the girl. His cock became even harder as he watched Tenten and Shizuka share in a sloppy, wet kiss. Shizuka must have known he was watching, too. She kept their mouths apart enough that he could see their tongues twining around each other. The act made his dick feel like it had been encased in a diamond jutsu. Since neither of the girls could talk, Naruto decided to simply begin moving again. He pulled back, then pushed forward faster than before. Tenten's eyes widened as she moaned into Shizuka's mouth. She couldn't say anything, though. Shizuka wouldn't let her. The other kunoichi plunged her tongue into Tenten's open mouth and ravaged her. All the while, Shizuka's own fingers plunged in and out of her now sodden passage. Naruto grunted as Tenten's body tightened again. Her thighs trembled, her legs clamped around his waist, and her stomach spasmed. Not even the extra lubrication from her orgasm helped ease the incredible tightness acting like a vice. Even so, Naruto pushed through that, continuing to fuck her silly. He gritted his teeth as he finally sensed his own release coming. When his balls felt like they were going to burst, he thrust himself into her one more time and unleashed his load, which caused Tenten to orgasm one more time. Pulling out, Naruto fell back onto his haunches as he struggled to catch his breath. He looked down. Tenten lay before him, body covered in sweat and Shizuka's saliva. Oddly enough, none of his cum was leaking from her lips. He guessed it was because her pussy was so tight it was all sealed up. She was breathing deeply. Naruto realized with a shock that she'd fallen asleep. I guess that means I did a good job. Wait. Where's Shizu? Naruto groaned as something warm engulfed his still hard member. Looking down revealed Shizuka cleaning off his shaft. She licked the mixed juices coating his dick like it was a popsicle. Then she looked up at him as her mouth sucked him in, though she could only take about half of him. With a lewd slurping nose, she pulled back and smacked her lips. So that's what it tastes like when your spunk mixes with another woman. She licked her lips. It's different than when you have one or the other separately. I might begin to enjoy this flavor. You sound awfully perverted right now, Naruto mumbled. When did you start speaking like a lecherous barmaid? Shizuka smiled. Since I decided to help Tenten make a decision, I figured it would be fine if I took the lead tonight. She hesitated long enough to reveal her uncertainty. Do you not like it? Honestly, you sound incredibly hot right now, Naruto admitted. You could probably make me hard by just talking dirty to me. Is that so? I'm glad. Shizuka gave him a genuinely happy smile before it turned devious. She discarded her robe, then slipped out of her panties. Turning around, she presented her posterior and, more important, her dripping vagina, to Naruto. As she leaned down and stuck her butt in the air, she reached out and spread her lips. I hope you're still able to go on. You have one more hole that needs to be filled. How right you are. Naruto sat up and walked on his knees to Shizuka. A soft smacking sound echoed around them as Naruto placed his hands on her hips, and then slowly filled Shizuka with his dick. You did such a great job helping Ten-chan out that I feel you deserve a reward. In that case, I want you to fuck me silly. Pound me so hard that my womb breaks. Your wish is my command. Unlike with Tenten, Naruto didn't start slowly. He shoved his throbbing member into Shizuka as though to break into her womb. The woman's back arched as she screamed out, goading him on with her voice. He pulled back and thrust into her again, picking up the pace. As he did, he looked down to watch as her firm butt cheeks jiggled with every thrust, as his cock, soaked in her juices, moved in and out of her. Yes. Oh, yes. That feels so good. That feels, so goodd. Oh, you're hitting me so deeply. Naruto leaned over as he kept thrusting his hips and began placing kisses on her back. Shizuka mewled like a cat as he did so, and then Naruto reached around and fondled her large tits, which swung back and forth from his almost violent pounding. Yes, 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 yes. Shizuka's voice was loud enough that he could have sworn the glass rattled. Wanting to feel her even more, Naruto wrapped an arm around her waist and fell backward. Now on his butt, Naruto grabbed her legs underneath her knees. He stood up and began thrusting into her again. This new position seemed to work. It felt completely different. Shizuka threw her head back against his shoulders, her cries completely incoherent now as her inner walls tightened around him. Her juices leaked out from her filled passage, dripping down her butt and his thighs. Even though she had already orgasmed, Naruto didn't stop. He kept going, bringing Shizuka to one more orgasm before he finally shot his spunk inside of her. Now completely spent, Naruto pulled out of Shizuka and set the young woman on the futon. The kunoichi was limper than a wet noodle. She didn't even have the strength to lift her arms. Naruto wasn't much better. He flopped down between her and Tenten, lying on his back as every cell in his body told him he'd pushed himself too hard. Hey, Naruto. Shizuka spoke. That was fun. I want to do it again. Maybe, you'll have to ask Tenten. I could also ask Temari or Koyuki. You could. Threesomes are fun. So, fun. Naruto didn't deny it. This had been a lot of fun, tiring, but fun. He wouldn't mind having another one, though he really didn't want this to become a regular occurrence. While he was quite proud in his stamina, Naruto didn't think he would be able to keep up if they had a threesome all the time like this. Strength returned to his body after a while. Shizuka must have regained some stamina too since she quickly cuddled into him. Tenten was still out like a light, so Naruto decided to just let her sleep. He closed his eyes and wondered what tomorrow might bring. XOX. After their first night in Nami no Kuni, Tazuna had told them, implicitly, and with a face that could have boiled a lobster, that if they were going to have sex, he wouldn't let them stay with him and his family. Naruto agreed to the man's terms. They wouldn't have any sex until after they left Nami no Kuni. For their part, both Tsunami and Inari had been blushing a lot the next morning. Inari couldn't even look Naruto in the eye, but Tsunami was even worse. She kept sending discreet glances when she thought he wasn't looking. On a side note, Ino had been teasing Naruto almost non-stop since that night, while Choji had discreetly asked him what having sex was like. Talk about embarrassing. There were still numerous matters that needed to be settled. First, Naruto had Ino conduct a medical exam on all of the kidnapped kunoichi and civilian women to make sure they were healthy. He didn't want to send them on their way if they were suffering from medical problems. There were a few women who had medical issues, including the kunoichi, Mai Shiranui, who was suffering from the mind-breaking drug flowing through her bloodstream. Mai was strong enough to ignore it. However, the civilians were not. Several women were actually in a nearly comatose state because of those drugs. Ino worked around the clock to flush the drug from their system, and even after she finally succeeded, she informed Naruto that there would be lingering side effects. While Ino dealt with the healing side of things, Naruto spoke at length with Kato. The first thing he did was give Kato the now captive Shato. He hadn't killed the man, though he was sure Shato wished he was dead. Since the two of them were related, Naruto believed it was Kato's duty as his brother to come up with a suitable punishment. Since he seemed so set on selling slaves, I believe I will let him know what being a slave is like, had been Kato's words during their conversation. Kato had also promised to help get all of the women safely home. He said it was the least he could do to fix his mistake of not stopping his brother from doing this in the first place. They stayed in Nami no Kuni for about 1 week, long enough for Ino to do everything she could for the kidnapped women, and then the group, now including over a dozen new kunoichi, journeyed back to Nadeshiko no Sato. Their procession to Nadeshiko no Sato was incredibly slow thanks to how many of them there were. It took about 1.5 weeks. Once they arrived, however, the group was welcomed back by the other kunoichi of the village. During the time where they had been in Nami, the Nadeshiko kunoichi had repaired the village until it was almost as pristine as it had been before. Since their mission was officially complete, Naruto and the others didn't stay for long. After spending a few more days to help the kunoichi settle back in, Naruto and the others left Nadeshiko no Sato. XOX. It sounds like you guys had a lot of trouble with this mission. I can see why it took so long, Tsunade said. Naruto, Ino, Choji, and Tenten were in the Hokage's office, giving a report on what happened during their mission to Nadeshiko no Sato. The woman sat with her fingers laced on the desk, brown eyes piercing them as they finished. It looks like this mission was a lot more complicated than we first realized. If I had known, well, you four seemed to handle it well, so good job. The group was promptly dismissed by Tsunade after the report had been made. While Ino and Choji said their goodbyes before going off to do whatever they did on their free time, Naruto and Tenten walked along the road together. While they weren't holding hands or anything so intimate, the distance between them had closed. Tenten no longer ignored him. She talked to him again just like they used to before the mission to Suna. Hey, Naruto, Tenten said suddenly. Yes, wanna get some ramen? Naruto's eyes lit up. Tenten, I think I love you. You think? Tenten blushed at his confession, but she tried to sound stern. What kind of confession is that? But Naruto just laughed. Of course I love you a lot. You're my Ten-chan. I idiot, Tenten muttered with a smile. The bright sun overhead heralded another beautiful day as the two ninja of Konoha went off to visit Ichiraku's together. Chapter 56. Where the Rain Never Stops. A blue sky marked the day as Naruto walked to the Hokage Tower. He'd woken up early that morning to discover a member of the Anbu waiting for him. His presence had been requested by the Hokage, apparently, and he'd been asked to meet with her as soon as he could. Thus Naruto had shelved his original plan to train that morning in favor of meeting with the old lady to see what she wanted. Tenten had still been asleep when he left. She'd only woken up briefly, long enough for him to tell her that he was leaving and give her a kiss goodbye. 2 weeks had passed since Naruto, Tenten, Ino, and Choji had returned from Nadeshiko no Sato. His relationship with Tenten had improved. These days it was not unusual for her to come over and spend the night at his place. It was also not unusual for them to have a lot of sex. Actually, their sexcapades had reached the point where he was worried she might have become addicted. Then again, maybe that was just him. After wandering into the Hokage Tower, Naruto traveled up to the Hokage's office. He didn't bother knocking. Busting the door wide open, he strode in with a confident gait and a grin that caused the whiskers on his cheeks to stretch. What do you want, you old hag? The moment that question left his lips, a paperweight flew at him, prompting Naruto to duck. There was a loud crash behind him. Turning to look at the paperweight, now embedded into the wall, Naruto could only silently click his tongue as he turned back to the annoyed woman sitting behind the desk. That might have actually hurt me if it hit me. Good. Tsunade twitched with barely repressed agitation as a vein appeared on her forehead, throbbing an angry red. It was supposed to hurt. I wish it had hit you. Now that's not very nice, Naruto muttered. Wandering further into the room, he found that Shizune was not present like normal. She must have been at the hospital. Since Tsunade was the Hokage, she couldn't run the hospital herself, so she left her first apprentice in charge of it. In Shizune's place was someone else, a man with white hair that looked like a lion's mane, a red vest over a green gi, and Geta sandals. Ero Sennin. Naruto frowned as he squinted at the man. What are you doing here? It must be pretty important to pull you away from your porn. That's a pretty rude thing to say to your sensei. Jiraiya shouted, though it lacked heat. The man didn't even seem to care. But you're right that what I'm here for is pretty important. Given that you've been involved with basically every incident involving Akatsuki up to this point, I'm sure you know that we've put a pretty nice dent in their forces. Tsunade began ticking members off her fingers. Hidan, Deidara, and Sasori have been disposed of. Akatsuki consisted of 7 S-ranked ninja from what we've gathered. Provided they haven't gained any new members, that means they are now down to only 4. Itachi and Kakazu are 2 of them, but we don't know anything about the others. Naruto nodded along with what they were saying, though he also rolled his eyes. I already know all of this, though I guess if you're reiterating this information, it means you've either discovered who the other members are, or you've found out where they are hiding. Give the brat some ramen. Jiraiya grinned as he clapped his hands. That's right. I believe I know where Akatsuki's leader is hiding. To be honest, I think I've known about it for a long time, but I dismissed the idea originally since I didn't think it was possible. Naruto looked at Jiraiya, at the look on the man's face, a mixture of cocky and serious. Jiraiya had crossed his arms and was giving off a stern yet somehow nervous vibe. And, where is this hideout? We believe the leader of Akatsuki has holed himself up in Imegakure no Sato, Tsunade said. How much do you know about the Hidden Rain village? Barely anything. Naruto shrugged as he shifted his feet against the floor. I know that because of its location between 3 of the 5 great shinobi nations, it has frequently served as a battleground during the various ninja wars. I also know that most of its population are war refugees because of those same ninja wars. That's about what most people know. Jiraiya stepped forward, toward the Hokage's desk, which he placed one of his hands against and began tapping on. Because Imegakure had suffered so much during all the ninja wars, Hanzo the Salamander adopted a heavy isolationist policy, leading to the village's defenses becoming almost impenetrable. Just being admitted into the village is a pain in the ass. Naruto didn't say anything at first as he pondered what Jiraiya and Tsunade were telling him. He bit the inside of his cheek, lightly, and came to the only conclusion he could think of. You believe that Akatsuki's leader is there? We do, Tsunade said. Naruto looked at Jiraiya, and then at Tsunade. And I'm guessing the reason Jiraiya is here, and the reason you summoned me, is because he and I are going to infiltrate Imegakure no Sato to locate this mysterious leader. Got it in one. Jiraiya's broad grin spoke of pride. That's right. You and I are going to be heading out on this mission tomorrow. This mission is an S-ranked one, Tsunade added. Not only that, but its confidentiality is being classified as SS rank. This is the kind of mission that never happened. You understand what I'm getting at, right? I do, and don't worry. Naruto raised a hand over his mouth and pretended to zip it closed. My lips are sealed. Saying his goodbyes to Jiraiya and Tsunade, Naruto quickly left the Hokage Tower and headed back to his apartment. He would have to get ready. However, there was someone he'd like to spend more time with before leaving on a dangerous mission that would last for Konoha knew how long. XOX. Jiraiya and Tsunade watched Naruto leave. The door shut behind the young blonde, and the sound of his receding footsteps tapered off. Once they were both certain that Naruto had left, the 2 Konoha ninja relaxed. Tsunade leaned back in her seat, crossed her arms, and turned her chair around to look at her old partner. Are you sure it's a wise idea to have Naruto come along with you? Tsunade asked. Worried. Jiraiya smirked at her. Of course I'm worried. Uncrossing her arms, Tsunade reached up to rub her forehead. You're traveling to Imegakure no Sato. On its own, that is a dangerous and foolhardy task. However, if Akatsuki really does have a base there, then the danger and foolishness is multiplied over 100-fold. It's like we're giving them Naruto in a handbasket. Well, you normally would have a point. Jiraiya walked around to the other side of Tsunade's desk, knelt, and opened a drawer. There was a bottle of sake and 2 saucers inside. He took them out, set the saucers on the desk, and uncorked the sake, which he then poured into the saucers. As the clear liquid sloshed around inside, he pushed one saucer over to Tsunade. However, I think you are greatly underestimating Naruto. Jiraiya lifted his own saucer and took a sip. I'm not underestimating him. Tsunade glared at Jiraiya before taking her own saucer in hand. She swirled the liquid around, staring into it with a pensive expression. I know how strong he is, but even if he was powerful enough to be Hokage, I would still feel hesitant about sending him on a mission like this. The Akatsuki are after him. Sending him straight into the belly of the beast is a terrible idea. And I don't disagree, Jiraiya admitted. But I also need him to come with me. Can't do this task by yourself? Asked Tsunade, a joking tone in her voice. However, the look Jiraiya gave her made the light smile curling her lips die. I'm getting up there in my years, Tsunade. I'm not the young man I used to be. Jiraiya downed the rest of his sake and poured himself some more. The tone in his voice was somber as he continued speaking. I don't think Naruto has realized it himself, but he's already surpassed me in many ways. I might be able to defeat him if I was in my prime, but I'm not. I no longer have the strength I once did. I see. Tsunade turned to look out the window, at Konoha, the village that she, Jiraiya, and even Naruto were doing their best to protect. She suddenly felt brittle, like something inside of her had broken. And that's why you want Naruto to come with you. Aside from you and I, Naruto is the strongest ninja in the village. Jiraiya sighed as he set the saucer down. He walked to stand beside Tsunade as she sat in her chair and also looked out the window. When Naruto gets serious, there's no one in this village who can beat him. Even Kakashi wouldn't stand a chance if he went all out. While I could sneak into Amgekure no Sato on my own, if I run into trouble, I'll need someone I can count on to bail me out. Which is why you're asking Naruto to come with you. Tsunade sighed. I understand. Just promise me that you two will be careful. I can't afford to have either of you dying on me. Finally, at those words, Jiraiya smirked. Would you miss me if I died on you? You wish. Tsunade chucked the now empty sake bottle at him, her eyes twinkling. XOX. Naruto returned home to find that Tenten was gone. His bed had been neatly made, and the sheets had even been changed out. That was a little disappointing, but he assumed she'd either be at the training ground with her team or her father's shop. He'd just head over to those places once he'd finished making breakfast. Because his apartment was so tiny, Naruto's kitchen and living room were one and the same. He went over to the fridge and opened it. There wasn't much. He would have to go shopping at some point, but he'd been so busy lately that he couldn't find the time. Still, he did spot a carton of eggs. He checked the carton and found 3 eggs were still left inside. It would have to be enough. Starting up the stove, Naruto pulled out a pan and cracked the eggs onto it. He quickly stirred the yolk in. While he was making scrambled eggs, a soft click alerted him to someone unlocking his apartment door. Only a few people had a key to his apartment. Of those people, only one of them was currently in Konoha. He kept his eyes on his food as the door opened, and then closed. You're already making breakfast. Tenten sounded disappointed. I was hoping to make some for you before you got back home. Naruto finally turned his head. Tenten stood in the doorway. She was frowning at him. In her left hand was a grocery bag, which he could only guess was filled with the ingredients she'd planned on using to make breakfast. Sorry, Naruto apologized. I honestly thought you'd gone back to your parents after waking up. Tenten sighed as she walked over to the counter and set the bag on top. It's fine, but here. If you're going to make breakfast, then at least make enough for the both of us. Inside the bag, Naruto found flour, cheese, milk, and another carton of eggs. He wondered what she'd been planning to make with all that. Will do, he said, grabbing 4 more eggs and cracking them over the pan. Since he had some cheddar as well, he added that into the mix and stirred it even more, whipping the scrambled eggs until the cheese had melted and the whole thing was light and fluffy. So, asked Tenten as she sat down at the table. What did the Hokage want? I'm going on another mission. Naruto turned off the stove and grabbed 2 plates and forks. It's one that Jiraiya and I are going on. Sadly, it's S-ranked and confidential, so I can't tell you anything about it. Tenten nodded as Naruto, after putting eggs onto both plates, wandered over to the table and set the plate next to her. She grabbed the fork embedded into the eggs and began eating as Naruto sat down and did the same. You'll tell me about it afterward, right? So long as the old bat permits it. I really don't think you should be calling our Hokage an old bat. Even if it is kind of true. Naruto and Tenten kept their conversation mostly light, though he did let her know that he'd be leaving on the mission tomorrow. He asked if she'd like to spend the day with him, but, sadly, Tenten informed him that she actually was scheduled to head out on a mission with her team. It was a simple B rank, but it would be a several-day mission. Tenten left soon after. Since Naruto had nothing better to do, he went over to one of the training grounds and spent his day practicing. There wasn't much he could do, though. Unless he wanted to practice his more destructive jutsu, which he'd been forbidden from doing within Konoha, there was nothing he could improve on. His physical abilities were about as good as they were going to get, his chakra control was as perfect as he'd ever be able to make it, and he had no trouble entering his yokai form at will. Naruto stared at his clawed hands, clenched them, then unclenched them. He could his chakra flowing through his tenketsu like a raging torrent. His eyes, which he knew had become purple, could see the chakra, though not as well as perhaps the Byakugan or the Sharingan. This wasn't a dojutsu. Without having to battle, Naruto could maintain this form for several hours, though his limit remained around 10 to 20 minutes during combat. He wondered if he could extend the time. Akane had told him it was possible, but she dropped out of contact before she told him how. Akane. She still hadn't spoken to him since his mission to Yuki no Kuni. He had tried contacting her several more times within the last few days, but no good had come of it. Naruto could no longer enter the seal. With a sigh, he released his hold on the transformation, welcoming the strange sense of exhaustion that made his body feel like it was being weighed down. Because the power acted almost like a drug, it left him drained whenever he stopped using it. He likened it to the Akamaiki's soldier pills. It boosted your stamina, but then once it ran its course, you were left more tired than you were before. I know you're there, Kakashi, Naruto said suddenly as a presence tickled his senses, like an itch in the back of his mind. Come on out. The man appeared before him, the same spiky silver hair, headband covering one eye, and perverted book in hand. He appeared as nonchalant as ever. That said, the fact that he was there meant something. I'm guessing you heard about the mission Ero Sennin and I are going on, Naruto said. I did. Though he had the book out, Kakashi was not reading it. He looked at Naruto and I smiled. That's why I've decided to ask you now if you wanted to get a drink with me. I've been meaning to do it for some time, but with how busy you've been, I haven't had the chance. Naruto didn't answer at first as he considered the man before him. While he'd never blamed Kakashi for it, this man had neglected Naruto's training in favor of Sasuke's. Because of that, he'd never really considered the person before him to be his sensei. That said, it wasn't like he actively disliked Kakashi either. Sure, Naruto said with a shrug. I've never gone drinking with another guy before. It should be interesting. I'm not really sure how to take that, Kakashi murmured as he snapped his book shut. It was a lot later in the afternoon than Naruto first realized. As Kakashi led him to a slightly seedier district of Konoha, or rather, a district filled with numerous bars, he looked up at the evening sun as it painted the sky red. The place where Kakashi led him through was getting boisterous, with loud voices echoing from inside numerous bars. Laughter rang out, muffled but still loud. Naruto couldn't see anything since these bars didn't have windows, the better to hide whatever raucous activities their patrons were getting up to. That said, one didn't need to be a genius to know what was going on inside. Kakashi led him to a place called the Rusty Kanai, which Naruto almost rolled his eyes at from how stereotypical it sounded. He wondered if all shinobi hangouts lacked originality as he entered the bar to see about what he had expected to see. Low lighting made it difficult to fully make out the patrons as they sat around tables, guzzling ale and laughing. Some were standing up, arms wrapped around each other's shoulders as they sang off-key songs. A woman with a sleeveless shirt arm wrestled several men at one table. Every man who came up to her lost. Come on, Kakashi said. Naruto followed the man up to the bar, where they both took a seat. He expected to find a bald man with more muscles than he knew what to do with cleaning a mug, but what he found instead was a young woman who seemed really cute. She was short, coming up to about his shoulder, had brown hair tied into pigtails and an innocent smile. What the fuck? Heya, Kakashi. The woman greeted with good cheer. I see you're not with the usual crowd. Who is this cutie? Naruto raised an eyebrow at the cutie comment, but Kakashi answered before he could come up with a suitably witty retort. Why, this is one of my cute students. I told you about them, remember? That you did. The woman nodded several times, then studied Naruto. Blonde hair, blue eyes, whiskers, you must be Naruto. I've heard a lot about you. It seems a lot of people have heard about me. Naruto couldn't think of anything else to say, so he said that. And you are Katarina. Her smile brimming with pride, the woman thrust out her modest chest. I'm the owner of this establishment. Really? Naruto looked around at all of the people causing mayhem inside. Then he looked back at her. I never would have imagined such a cute girl could run a bar like this. Hoo. This Katarina woman sure had a strange laugh. Not many people do, but it's true. I am the one who owns and operates this fine drinking establishment. We'd like to get 2 of your specials please, Kakashi said when Naruto found himself unable to think of anything else he could say. His brain felt like it had been melted with a fire jutsu. Also, bring us some of your chilled sake please. Sure thing. I'll have your order up in a gif. The woman turned around and began shouting in a voice that somehow carried over the ruckus. Hey, Ichi. We've 2 orders of the special. Naruto looked past the woman to find a kitchen located in the very back of the bar. The bar itself was located in the center, a round table encircling the entire thing. The center had numerous taps with different names on them. He only recognized a few of the ales being stacked on top of one another. Your orders will be out in just a minute. In the meantime, Katarina took out a large bottle of chilled sake from somewhere below, set it on the counter, and then pulled out 2 small glasses and set them next to the sake. Here is your chilled sake. Thank you. Kakashi I smiled at the girl, who beamed right back before having to turn around because one of the other patrons called out to her. This is an interesting establishment, Naruto said as Kakashi poured sake into both glasses and slid one over to him. That woman may not look like it, but she's a former Anbu operative, Kakashi stated as he lifted his cup. Naruto could only shake his head when the man drank it without even pulling down his mask. She worked under me for a time, but the stress became too much and she quit. After that she opened this bar, claiming that if there had been a bar like this where she could unwind after a mission, she would have had an easier time coping. Well, that's an interesting reason to run a bar. Isn't it? The 2 sipped their sake in silence for a time, though that certainly didn't mean silence reigned supreme. They might have been quiet. However, pretty much every other patron in the bar was anything but. Naruto could not withhold a grimace as numerous loud noises echoed all around him, from overly enthusiastic voices to the sound of hands and mugs slamming into tables. Finally, Kakashi sighed. The reason I brought you here is because I wanted to apologize. Naruto raised an eyebrow. For what? For not being a better sensei, for putting Sasuke before you, for not teaching you properly. I feel like we've already been through this once before. Maybe, but it bears repeating. Kakashi poured himself another glass of sake while Naruto finished sipping his first. I had a friend who was an Uchiha. He's the one who gave me this eye. Were it not for my friend giving me this eye, there were many times where I would have died. It's thanks to him that I'm alive today. And so you feel indebted to him, and that's why you taught Sasuke over me. Kakashi grimaced. That's one of the reasons. The other one was because I saw a lot of myself in Sasuke. However, I also saw a lot of darkness in him. I had been hoping that I could lead him away from his path as an avenger by giving him something better, but I was wrong. Even after doing everything I could to help him, Sasuke still abandoned the village. This must have been eating Kakashi up for a while now. Naruto traced his finger along the lip of his cup, thinking about how Kakashi must have felt when, after doing everything he could to help Sasuke form strong ties to the village, the boy ended up leaving anyway. He couldn't. While Naruto did feel betrayed by Sasuke abandoning Konoha, he wasn't so stuck on the boy that returning him to the village was his only concern. I don't think you should let yourself wallow in the past like this, sensei, Naruto said at last, using the term sensei to show his sincerity. You did what you could to help Sasuke, and he rejected your help. That's all there is to it. If you really want to prove you're sorry, then make up for it by doing what you can now to help the village prosper. Kakashi looked at Naruto like he was seeing him for the first time, and then the man's only visible eye closed and flipped into an upside-down U. There was that famous eye smile of his. I know you've done a lot of maturing during your journey with Lord Jiraiya, but I'm surprised by just how much you've grown. I am my father's son. The words made Kakashi pause, likely because he knew who Naruto's father was. Kakashi had been a former pupil of the 4th Hokage, Minato Namikaze, Naruto's old man. He didn't doubt that Kakashi had also known who he was before accepting Team 7 as his students. After a moment passed, Kakashi relaxed and raised his glass. Yes, you are at that. Cheers. Naruto grinned as he clinked his glass against Kakashi's. As one, the two tilted their heads back and slammed the sake down. Konoha's nightlife continued to echo around them. XOX. Naruto woke up alone that morning. He frowned at the empty spot beside him, which would normally have been filled by Tenten or Temari, depending on who was there at the time. With a sigh, he climbed out of bed, made breakfast, brushed his teeth, and got dressed. The sun had just risen when Naruto left his apartment to meet Jiraiya at the gates. His sensei was already there. He was wearing the same clothes as always. However, strapped around behind his back was a massive scroll, the summoning contract for the toads of Mount Myoboku, which Jiraiya only carried when he planned to go on long journeys. Jiraiya gave him a grin. You all ready to go, brat? Who do you take me for, you old pervert? Asked Naruto as he patted his ninja pouch. I've got everything I need right here. Good. Then let's head out. No sense in wasting daylight. After checking out at the gate, Naruto and Jiraiya headed for the Omegakure no Sato. XOX. Omegakure no Sato was known as the village hidden in the rain specifically because it almost constantly rained there. Surrounding the village was a massive lake. The waters of this lake were constantly being disturbed as tiny droplets of rain sprinkled it, creating small ripples on the surface. Swimming through this lake was a seemingly innocuous frog, whose shadow could only vaguely be seen before its head popped out of the water's surface. Then the front opened its mouth. Without warning and defying every logical convention known to man, a hand emerged from the frog's mouth. The hand was followed by an arm, then a shoulder, then a head, and a body. Slowly but surely, a man emerged from inside of the frog. Dressed in a red jacket with a green GI, battle mesh armor, and a scroll on his back, Jiraiya of the Sannin knelt on the water as another figure emerged from the frog's mouth. That was certainly not the most glamorous way to travel, Naruto commented as he stood up and brushed himself off. A ninja's life isn't always glamorous. Jiraiya also stood up. You should know that. That doesn't make me feel any better. The village of Omegakure no Sato stood before them, a series of industrial structures that loomed above their heads like towers. It looked nothing at all like Konoha, which blended in with the surrounding nature. This was a place of steel and cement. All the buildings towered in the sky, with pipes jutting from them in a convoluted network. There didn't seem to be any rhyme or reason for them, though Naruto was sure they had one. That said, he didn't think they were sewage pipes, so he was at a loss to figure out what they were. Well, let's not waste any daylight. Jiraiya adjusted the scroll on his back and began moving toward the village. Naruto sighed, but he dutifully followed his sensei. They both put on a raincoat and pulled the hoods over their heads as they entered the village. Naruto was not wearing his headband, but his vibrant blonde hair would definitely stand out. Perhaps because the village was surrounded by a lake, there were numerous large rivers running through it. As Naruto and Jiraiya walked past other people wearing raincoats, he wandered over to the railing and looked down at the boats ferrying people across the river. Beyond the river were numerous other walkways. Some sloped, others were flat. Naruto spotted a large number of staircases in the distance. Everything looked very dull. Naruto didn't know if it was the rain, but this place just looked dreary. The buildings were all a very drab color, a faded gray that blended in with the steel pipes running throughout the village. Likewise, none of the people looked truly happy. Their expressions were lifeless and shallow. He wondered if that meant they were being oppressed, or if the people who live here were just that boring. As they continued to wander, Jiraiya went over to a small shop that was selling steamed pork buns. An old lady sat on a stool next to the wooden steamers. Rain dripped off. Naruto walked over to him just as Jiraiya paid for 2 pork buns and tossed one to him. I haven't seen your faces before, the woman said. Are you not from around here? That's correct. I'm actually a writer, Jiraiya said easily enough. I travel the world and write about regional cuisine and products for a magazine. This young lad here is my apprentice. I'm teaching him how to spin a good tale to make his articles pack more punch. As soon as he finished, Jiraiya took a bite of the pork bun. Naruto decided to do the same. He actually paused, though, when the steamy insides hit his tongue. There was no intense burst of flavor, but the softness of the bun complemented the savory warmth of the steamed pork. I see. And how do you like my pork buns? Asked the old lady. They're delicious, Jiraiya said, and it wasn't a lie. They weren't the best, but they were pretty damn good. Naruto quickly finished his. I heard about them from a friend, but even I wasn't expecting them to be this amazing. A twinkle entered the woman's eyes as she smiled. I know. Aren't they? Jiraiya held the pork bun aloft, waving his hand back and forth as if to emphasize it. I'd like to introduce them in our magazine. Is that okay? In a magazine? The woman seemed startled. Yes. Although, Jiraiya leaned down and cupped a hand to his mouth as though getting ready to share a secret. The old woman leaned in. Once I write about them, you'll have such a big crowd you won't be able to rest. The woman's eyes widened as Jiraiya stood back up. She laughed as she said, I see. That would be a problem. Naruto pretended to be a diligent apprentice by pulling out a notepad, a pen, and jotting down notes. Meanwhile, Jiraiya looked left, then right, a smile growing on his face. It sure is peaceful around here. Ah. The woman nodded as her face brightened even more. This village is no longer plagued by war thanks to Lord Pain. She closed her eyes and clasped her hands together. We're so grateful to him. The look on Jiraiya's face was nonplussed, as though he'd heard her words but didn't know what to make of them. He mulled the words around for a bit. Naruto could practically see the fire jutsu igniting inside of his head. Whatever happened to Hanzo the salamander? He asked. The woman held a hand to her ear as though she hadn't heard him. Jiraiya began to lean down when Naruto noticed that all of the villagers walking past them had stopped. He tapped the older ninja's geta with his sandals discreetly so as not to give himself away. That caused his sensei to stop what he was doing and look around. Once he noticed the looks he was getting, Jiraiya coughed into his hand. Never mind. Jiraiya laughed off his nervousness. It's been a long time since I've been to this village, so I hadn't realized there was a new leader. Well, Lord Pain has been our leader for several years now, the old woman said. I see. Jiraiya paused and considered what to do. I'll be sure to write that article for you. Take care of yourself, Granny. Thank you for the meat bun. Naruto smiled at the woman and bowed his head. It was delicious. As the two wandered off, leaving the quiet crowd of civilians who'd been staring at them behind, Naruto looked at his sensei. The befuddled and serious expression on the man's face was not one that his perverted teacher normally wore. It let him know that something was wrong. However, just as Naruto began to feel unsettled, Jiraiya stopped walking. He was confused at first, but then he saw what had made his sensei stop. There was a bright neon sign with yellow lights outlining it. Near the top were two glowing pink hearts being pierced by an arrow. The bottom had the name Makeout Pub War. So places like this exist even in AIM, Naruto muttered with distaste. Well, I guess shinobi need some way to relieve their stress. Naruto, I'm gonna do a little intelligence gathering in there, Jiraiya said, wiping his mouth of the drool that had begun leaking out. Do whatever you want. Naruto sighed. In the meantime, I'll see if I can't find another method of getting information. Naruto had no desire to enter a place like that. He didn't begrudge others who wanted to relax by having some hot chick in a skimpy outfit pour him drinks, but he was perfectly content with his sex life and didn't see the point in a place where you could only look and not touch, unless you paid a hefty fee. That was so not his thing. The two ninjas split up. Jiraiya skipped into the adult-only bar, while Naruto decided to keep wandering the street. XOX. Konan watched her friend as he stood beneath the rain. Pain hadn't moved from that spot for a while now. This was not unusual, but several times in the last few minutes, he had shifted as though something had attracted his attention. Is something wrong, Lord Pain? Asked Konan. I sensed two strong presences enter the village a little while ago. Pain tilted his head. They are incredibly powerful. Konan looked over the rainy village, at the water splattering against the rooftops, walls, and floors. A trickle of worry seeped into her gut. Their village had been secure against intrusion for so long now, even before Pain had taken over the village. Who could possibly infiltrate it? Conan, when I stop the rain, seek out the intruders with your jutsu. Got it. Conan raised her hands and made a simple seal as Pain shifted through a series of hand seals. They were the seal he used to activate and deactivate his sensor jutsu, Ukojizai no Jutsu, a contact-type perception ninjutsu that allowed him to freely manipulate rain infused with his own chakra. The rain fell from the clouds, formed by Pain's own chakra. During this technique, the falling raindrops were closely linked to Pain's senses. This allowed him to sense foreign chakra signatures. The detection of the rain, however, was not specific. Pain only knew when someone had entered the vicinity of the rain but not where they were. That was where Conan came in. Pain raised his hands after finishing his numerous hand seals, and, after several seconds had passed, the rain pouring down on Megakure no Sato eased up, and then it ceased altogether. Conan glanced to her left. Several small droplets of water trailed down the lip of the roof, coalescing into a Pain large drop that fell to the floor with a splash. Lowering his hands, Pain turned just his head and looked at Conan. Do it, Conan. Right. Conan lowered her hands and manipulated her chakra. A small crack suddenly appeared on her face, and then another and another. Soon, multiple lines formed along not only her face but her body as well. Rustling sounds like paper being crinkled echoed all around them as Conan spread her arms wide. And became paper. Her body transformed into hundreds of thousands of sheets of paper, all of which floated into the air, wavering like they were caught in a breeze. One by one, the sheets of paper began folding. Creases formed as the paper bent numerous times. The end result was that each sheet of paper had taken on the shape of a butterfly. Pain stood in place as the thousands of paper butterflies took off, slowly disappearing as they dispersed throughout the city. XOX. The rain has stopped. Naruto looked out the window of a small shop he'd been eating at. While the sky was still cloudy, it was no longer raining, though the city was still very wet. He watched a few droplets of water as they trailed down the window. While Jiraiya enjoyed himself at the rather adult drinking establishment, Naruto had spent his time talking with various shop owners. He used his cheerful personality to engender himself to them. People were more willing to talk if they thought you were a good person. Unlike his sensei, whose line of questioning was regarding Hanzo, Naruto focused on learning more about this Pain character. He was the village leader. According to what Naruto had heard, Pain had defeated Hanzo and brought peace to the village. However, he also killed anyone who he thought was associated with Hanzo. No one seemed to know a whole lot about Pain. In fact, it seemed as if very few people even knew what Pain looked like. That said, everyone there had an almost unhealthy reverence for this man. The look in their eyes as they spoke of Pain, how he had saved them, how he had brought peace, had disturbed Naruto a great deal. It was almost like they thought this man was a god. Something else Naruto learned was that Pain didn't work alone. He had a woman who worked with him, and unlike Pain, who almost never showed himself in public, this woman had been seen around the village. They called her Lady Angel. He didn't know if she had another name. If she did, no one seemed to know it. Still, the idea of this woman being an angel only reinforced the idea that these people thought their village leader was a god. Oh, you're right, a young woman who'd been catering to Naruto said as she looked out the window. She had a tray with a plate of hot tea and some dango resting on it. He would have preferred ramen, but he'd picked up a taste for the stuff thanks to Anko. That's quite odd. Lord Pain normally doesn't stop the rain so suddenly like this. I wonder if he's planning to send Lady Angel out on an errand. Does Lady Angel appear often, then? Asked Naruto as the woman set his tea and dango on the table. Oh, yes. The woman smiled. She appears quite a lot, actually. She normally travels around the village and helps people who are having problems. I've also seen her playing with the children sometimes. She sounds like a nice person, Naruto said. She is very nice. Naruto didn't stay in the shop for very long. After finishing his meal, he left and headed into the streets. Given what Naruto had learned so far, the rain that had been falling on Megakure appeared to be related to some kind of sensor ninjutsu. If the rain stopped, he could only assume that it was because the ninjutsu was not accurate enough to locate him and Jiraiya. That meant Pain would be sending this lady angel to locate them. To avoid a confrontation, Naruto stuck to the main streets where traffic was heaviest. Instead of disguising himself with a transformation jutsu, he used makeup and a wig to make himself look like a member of the village. If this lady angel was a censor, she'd probably still find him, but it would be harder. Naruto also created several shadow clones and had them transform into various animals, mostly rats and birds, which then traveled either through the air or the numerous pipes located throughout the city. He didn't know where Jiraiya was. However, if he knew his sensei even half as well as he thought he did, then he suspected the man was likely interrogating a ninja of the village by this point. Should I meet up at the assigned meeting point? Once they had all of the information they could gather, he and Jiraiya had agreed to meet at the edge of the village. As he pondered whether or not he should head to the meeting point, a large surge of chakra erupted from several dozen meters away, causing Naruto's head to snap around like it had whiplash. He wasn't the greatest sensor. That said, the giant surge of chakra was something that even a novice could sense. Channeling chakra into his eyes, Naruto looked in that direction. The world around him shifted. Everything became shades of gray, save for the chakra signatures all around him. Most were very basic. Their blue flames were small and let him know they weren't very powerful. However, there were 3 among those flames that were impressive. Naruto recognized Jiraiya. The man's chakra looked like a reddish-brown flames. He was next to 2 other signatures. Both were powerful. The size of their flames, of their chakra, was on par with Jiraiya and other cage-level ninja. One of them was white. The other was muddled. Naruto couldn't make heads or tails of that one, but it was easily the most powerful chakra signature he'd felt to date. Has he been found out? Well, obviously. If 2 such powerful signatures were confronting Jiraiya, then they had definitely discovered the man. Cursing to himself, Naruto discarded his disguise and took to the roofs. Several shouts echoed behind him. He ignored them and created several shadow clones to keep any ninja that chased him busy. Traveling along the walls, over pipes, and across roofs, Naruto soon came upon a very obvious battle site. Jiraiya was fighting against a man with orange hair and many piercings. Both were standing atop a summons. Jiraiya was on a toad, who Naruto recognized as Gameiken, while the man was on a giant chameleon-like lizard. The lizard's summon looked odd. There were so many piercings stuck in the creature's body that Naruto wondered how it was still alive. Also, its eyes were unusual. There were no whites in its eyes. Concentric rings spread out from the pupil-like ripples on the surface of a pond. Naruto noticed that those eyes matched the eyes of the man standing on top of it. Naruto would have wondered what that was about, but before he could even begin to get closer, several shuriken flew from out of nowhere. He twisted his body like a corkscrew, dodging the attacks. A sharp pain struck his cheek as one sliced into him, or so it seemed, until Naruto disappeared in a burst of smoke. A shadow clone, is it? A woman floating high above Naruto asked as she turned to face the real Naruto, who stood several meters from where the clone was dispelled. You were quite skilled to replace yourself with a shadow clone so quickly. I barely even noticed it. Thank you for the compliment. Naruto gave the woman a cheerful smile. You must be this, Lady Angel, that everyone keeps talking about. The woman before him really did seem angelic, and not just because of her paper wings. Her light blue hair framed a delicate face. Brown eyes were narrowed in a natural sensuality. She had a lip piercing. While her body was covered by the traditional Akatsuki cloak, even Naruto could tell from the way certain places swelled that she had a body worth dying for. And if I am not mistaken, you are the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki, Naruto Uzumaki. The lady gazed at him as her wings flapped to keep her aloft. It was foolish of you to come here. You think so? Naruto began circulating chakra through his body. I don't know about that. It seems to me like I'm doing something you Akatsuki people never expected. Sometimes doing what your enemy least expects is the best thing to do. HMPH. You sound just like Jiraiya-sensei. Jiraiya-sensei. Naruto was nonplussed by those words, but he wasn't given any time to question them. The woman before him suddenly split apart into many sheets of paper, which then folded themselves into shurikens and flew at him. Left with little choice, Naruto replaced himself with yet another shadow clone. As he reappeared on a roof several meters away, Naruto took off running. It would be better to battle this woman away from Jiraiya. There was no sense in mixing their battles together. Neither of them needed that kind of chaos right now. The woman quickly chased after him. He could hear the flapping of her wings behind him. Given that they were also made of paper and that she had transformed into paper, Naruto could only assume that all of her jutsu were paper-based techniques. He'd never seen jutsu like that before. They must have been unique to her. Several more paper shuriken flew at him from all directions, but Naruto twisted his body and blew them all away. Senpuken. Large gusts of wind burst from his fist and tore the shuriken apart like they were made of paper. Naruto landed on a roof and fired off several more of the same jutsu. Each one blasted apart numerous paper shuriken. He then backflipped to avoid an attack that came from above. 6 shuriken became embedded into the roof. The woman raised her hands above her head as she floated in the sky. Naruto narrowed his eyes when a large quantity of paper sheets converged above her head, turning into a chakram-like shape. With little ceremony, the woman threw the chakram at him. Narrowing his eyes further, Naruto waited until the last moment before dodging to the side. Nice try, he taunted, but that won't. Alarm bells flared inside of his mind. Naruto leapt away from where he'd been standing. The chakram the woman had thrown flew through the spot not even a second later. It then curved around, coming toward him again. What's more, the woman had made 2 more chakrams, which she threw at him as well. Well, this is annoying. It looked like she could control the chakram's trajectory and speed with her chakra. He guessed since the paper sheets came from her, she was able to freely manipulate them however she wanted. Since it was clear that dodging them would get Naruto nowhere, he grounded himself on the roof, bending his knees and bringing his elbows into his torso. He breathed in. The chakrams came closer. Then he breathed out and launched 3 senpukens simultaneously using his fists and left foot. His attacks hit the 3 chakram, which exploded violently, sending paper flying out in all directions. You are a most troubling opponent, the woman said. I could say the same thing to you. Those paper attacks of yours are really annoying. The woman didn't respond to his taunt with words. She launched a multitude of sharp paper planes at him in rapid succession. That's not gonna work. Senpu Tatsumaki. Naruto thrust out his fists and released a massive stream of chakra, which quickly spiraled outward in the shape of a giant tornado. His attack slammed into the paper. Naruto expected his attack to shred the paper to bits, but that wasn't what happened. What the hell? Instead of his technique shredding apart the paper, it was the paper that shredded apart his technique. Naruto was forced to leap backward as the sharp paper slammed into where he'd been standing. He gawked as the paper projectiles punctured numerous holes into the steel roof. What the flying fuck? How could paper be that strong? I see, he murmured as he looked at the woman. Not only can you freely control paper by infusing it with your chakra, you can change the paper's density, making it harder than diamonds. You are very astute, the woman said. Hey, of course I am. You're looking at the best damn ninja on the face of the planet. Naruto grinned at the lady, whose eyes widened ever so slightly. That was an interesting reaction. HMPH. Anyway, if we're going to continue this battle, do you mind if I at least had your name? Calling you, Lady Angel, in my head is annoying. Quote. The woman didn't say anything for a long time, leading Naruto to believe she wouldn't say anything. But then, my name is Conan, the voice came from behind him. What? Herc. Naruto turned his head to find Conan standing behind him, and then something sharp pierced his back, slicing through his body and emerging out of his chest. He looked down. Poking from his chest with a slick coating of blood was a paper sword. He looked up. The Conan, floating above him suddenly unraveled into several sheets of paper. So that's what happened. You replaced yourself with a paper clone and snuck up behind me. Very clever. Naruto turned his head to grin at the woman. But you know, clones are my specialty. Conan twitched when the Naruto she had impaled disappeared. Rasengan. She leapt away when the real Naruto plummeted from the sky, a swirling ball of chakra in his hand. His attack slammed into the roof. Metal shrieked as it was ripped apart like someone had stuck it in a grinder. The jutsu exploded outward seconds later, causing the hole in the roof to become even larger. Naruto stood up and glared at Conan as she floated away again. This game of cat and mouse was beginning to get annoying. As they fought, several loud explosions rang out from far away. Neither of them looked away from each other. However, both of them knew that the explosions were being caused by the battle between Jiraiya and Pain. It looks like Ero Sennin and your master are still going at it. So it seems. Then perhaps we should end this. I agree. Konan launched more of those paper projectiles, which Naruto decided to call paper kunai, from her wings. He moved back to avoid them. However, this time, when they struck the roof, each one exploded in a massive geyser of fire. The heat singed his face while the force of the explosions threw him back. She must have wanted to knock him off balance. Konan appeared above him and threw numerous paper shuriken at Naruto while he was stumbling, but he avoided them by launching a powerful tornado to his left, using the resulting force to push him away from her attacks. Since Konan was flying in the sky, Naruto decided to follow her lead. He expelled wind chakra from his body, particularly his feet, and launched himself at her. A frontal assault that won't work. Konan once more sent numerous paper kunai at Naruto, but he expelled more wind chakra from specific tenketsu to push himself into a series of complex aerial maneuvers. Deftly avoiding each attack, Naruto closed the distance as he created a Rasengan in both hands. Rasengan. He thrust out his right Rasengan first. Konan dodged by rotating her body to the left, but doing so left her wing exposed, and his Rasengan tore through it with ease. Using the force created from dispelling his Rasengan, Naruto spun around and shoved the Rasengan in his other hand straight into the woman's chest. Konan exploded. A massive gout of fire tossed Naruto away, burning his skin and clothing. He fell to the ground, striking it with great force, and then he disappeared in a cloud of smoke. This is getting us nowhere, Naruto muttered. Konan was clearly an intelligent shinobi who analyzed her opponents and used deception to attack with paper ninjutsu. She could also use exploding notes to great effect, which he guessed was an extension of her paper ninjutsu. Her main method of fighting seemed to be luring shinobi in to attack her, then attacking with explosive tags. She also had a jutsu where she would transform into paper and cover her opponent's body, but Naruto could break out of that easily by expelling wind chakra from his tenketsu. The problem was that Naruto couldn't land a solid attack. Whenever he got close, she replaced herself with a clone and made it explode or tried to restrict his movements. She was excellent at keeping her distance. Naruto assumed this meant she wasn't well versed in close quarters combat, but since she wasn't good at taijutsu, it meant she had become adept at avoiding situations that required close quarters combat. If he wanted to win, Naruto would have to trick her into getting close. By this point in time, their battle had taken them far across a megacre, over many roofs and through numerous pipes. The amount of damage left in their wake was extensive. Fortunately, no one else had been around for their battle, meaning there'd been no civilian casualties. Naruto wasn't the type who wanted to hurt innocent people. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Naruto created 6 Shadows clones that threw themselves at Konan, attacking from all directions. They converged on her like vultures on a corpse. However, the Konan they attacked exploded with incredible force. The pipe Naruto found himself shook as a massive hole appeared on the side. His sense of danger alerted Naruto to an attack from behind. He dodged left, shuffled his feet along the ground, and spun like a top. Expelling wind chakra from his body created a massive tornado around him that tore several dozen paper shurikens apart, but just as he did that, each shuriken exploded with impossible force and his tornado was engulfed in flames. Replacing himself with a shadow clone, Naruto rushed out through the hole, leapt onto another pipe several meters away, and then ran up a wall until he had landed on the roof. The flat roof only had a few pipes sticking out, and they weren't very big. That meant he had no cover. Konan tried to follow him, but Naruto finally created several hand seals and unleashed a massive ninjutsu. Futon. Furyu no Jutsu, Wind Release, Wind Dragon Technique. Chakra gathered in Naruto's lungs, expanding his chest. Just as Konan was about to reach his roof, he expelled all of that chakra in a single gust, which burst from his mouth like an enraged monster and quickly assumed the shape of a dragon easily 10 meters in length. The dragon slammed into Konan, tearing her body apart. She was another paper clone. However, the real one did not appear to be present. Before Naruto could search for Konan, something else caught his attention. Naruto was standing on the roof of a building near the edge of a megacre lake. Down below was a multi-tiered walkway that acted as a wall with multiple levels of defense. Dozens of large pips emerged from the bottom of the wall and traveled into the water. One section of the wall was rounded out, forming a half-cylinder. 6 people stood on that wall. All of them had orange hair and wore the black cloak with red clouds that Akatsuki had made famous. Each one had pale skin, numerous piercings, and strange, ripple-like eyes. Naruto couldn't make heads or tails of them. Were those eyes part of a dujutsu? But how could so many people have the same dujutsu? Were they members of a clan like the Hyuga or the Uchiha? The 6 individuals were gazing down at someone standing on the water, and Naruto felt a jolt travel through him when he realized it was Jiraiya. The man's nose had grown large. Several warts had formed on it. What's more, his pupils had turned into black bars. There were 2 toads standing on his shoulders, whom Naruto recognized as the Elder Toads. Jiraiya had entered the fabled sage mode. That was surprising, but what surprised Naruto, what sent ripples of shock and fear through him, was not that Jiraiya had been forced to use his ultimate technique. It was that Jiraiya was missing his right arm. Naruto had no idea what was going on, but just then, all 6 of the strange individuals leapt from the balustrade and attacked Jiraiya. Even with one arm, the man was a badass. He held off the first 3 that attacked him, avoiding their attacks, and then launched himself at the one standing further back. However, that man caught his hand, twisted his wrist, and then threw him away like he weighed less than a feather. One of the other ninja raised his hand. Several strange tube-like things appeared around his wrist, which flew at Jiraiya as the man landed on a wall. He ran up the wall. The devices struck the wall, and then they exploded. As Jiraiya leapt away from the explosions, the man with spiky hair raised his hand, and as though it was being pulled by an invisible force, the wall behind Jiraiya was torn from the surrounding area with the intent to slam the old ninja into the water. Naruto wasted no time in leaping down from the roof. He used wind chakra to boost his speed, creating distortions in the air as he flew unerringly toward the massive chunk of wall that was threatening to crush his sensei. While he flew, Naruto created 6 shadow clones and had each one charge up a powerful attack. Futon. Rasengan. 6 Rasengans powered with wind chakra slammed into the wall, creating a massive detonation of wind. The clones were dispelled. Their own attacks had destroyed them. Meanwhile, the real Naruto grabbed Jiraiya and leapt away as the wall was engulfed in a massive sphere of destruction. Naruto. It looks like you could use a hand, Naruto said. Seeing how you're missing one of yours. Now's not the time for jokes. Jiraiya snapped as 3 of the strange figures leapt at them. Senpuken. Naruto's jutsu slammed into the first one, launching him away, but then the second one reached them and Naruto was forced to engage the man in taijutsu. Unfortunately, he was still in the air and therefore had no traction. He let go of Jiraiya and was pushed back. Landing on the water, Naruto shuffled backward as a long-haired man and a bald man attacked him. The bald one threw a punch. Naruto tilted his body to dodge, but then the guy's fist suddenly extended. As it grew in length, Naruto realized the man's hand had actually detached from his wrist. There was a long cord keeping the 2 connected. Several of those explosives were attached to the cord. With plumes of smoke, they were launched at Naruto, who had no choice but to replace himself with a shadow clone. When he appeared several meters away, he made several dozen more shadow clones and had them split up and hide themselves. The long-haired one tried to attack him next, but Naruto flowed around his less than coordinated attacks and launched a powerful, wind-infused kick that sent the man crashing into a wall. He would have celebrated, but then several more explosives were launched his way. Rather than avoid them by dodging, Naruto held out his hands and created a powerful barrier of wind chakra. He winced as the explosion slammed into his barrier. Leaping back, he kept the barrier up while charging his next attack. That was the plan. Before he could, the man he'd launched away came at him again. Naruto had to release his wind barrier in favor of defending himself. The long-haired individual reached out to touch his chest. Naruto sensed something weird about the act. He quickly leapt back as a strange purple chakra connected to his body and tugged at something inside of him. It was like this thing was trying to pull out his soul. Slamming his hands on the water, Naruto shoved a huge amount of wind chakra underneath the surface, which created a massive tidal wave that rose up and swallowed the 2 individuals. They weren't the only ones either. The 4 people who Jiraiya had been fighting were forced to leap away from his sensei as the wave crashed into them. Jiraiya also leapt into the air. Landing near Naruto, he and his apprentice stood back to back as the 6 figures surrounded them on all sides. "Who the hell are these people?" asked Naruto. "I don't know," Jiraiya narrowed his frog-like eyes. "They call themselves the 6 Paths of Pain, but I have no idea what that even means." "So Pain is 6 people?" "I don't know. You're no help at all." "Don't be like that. I found out a lot of useful information." Sure. Why don't you tell it to me later? I'll determine how useful it is." "You are, the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki," the Pain with short, spiky hair said. "I had known there were 2 of you, but I didn't realize one of you was the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki. You have given us a lot of trouble. I'll be sure to defeat you here and take the Kyuubi away from you." "Ha!" Naruto barked. "That's rich. I don't know who you think you are, but there's no way I'd ever let you take Akane from me. I don't even think that's possible anymore." The Pain that Naruto was talking to narrowed his eyes. "We shall see," was all he said before he and the 5 other Pains attacked in earnest. Chapter 57. The Broken Seal. Kuchio's no Jutsu. One of the Pains, the one with long hair tied into a ponytail, slammed his hands on the water. A seal appeared before smoke erupted from beneath him. Naruto had already leapt back when the group charged in, so he was able to avoid being pulverized when a massive creature suddenly raced through the smoke. It charged on 4 legs, had a number of piercings on its body, the same ripple eyes the Pains had, and small wings on its back. The horn emerging from its head made the creature's origins obvious. "This guy has a summoning contract with rhinos." No one answered Naruto as the rhino charged at him with reckless abandon, running along the water's surface with ease. Naruto had no intention of letting this thing ram him. Creating a shadow clone, Naruto dove underneath the water's surface and made a hand seal. The clone above him raised his hands and, as the rhino barreled into him, caught the creature by its horn. The clone skid along the water for several meters, muscles bulging, but he managed to stop the beast in its tracks. At that exact same moment, Naruto launched himself upward, wind chakra shooting from his feet, and emerged from the water. He was underneath the rhino. He extended his hand. Rasengan. Wasting no time, Naruto slammed a Rasengan into the creature's soft underbelly. His jutsu tore through the creature like it was made of paper. Blood and guts splattered all over the place, but Naruto ignored that as he put more chakra into his technique, drilling straight through the rhino, which split in half as Naruto shot through its body and emerged from its back. Now dead, the creature disappeared in a puff of smoke. Futon. Rasengan. While Naruto dealt damaging punishment to the rhino, one of his clones had emerged from its hiding spot and tried to attack the Pain that had done the summoning. He appeared behind the Pain and thrust a Rasengan at his enemy's back. Yet before he could actually hit the man, one of the other Pains leapt into the attack. This one also had long hair, but it wasn't in a ponytail. It was long and unbound. The Naruto clone's Rasengan drilled straight through the man, ripping him apart with an almost wet splatter. Kuchio's no Jutsu. Smoke engulfed the field once more as the Pain who summoned the rhino summoned something else. Naruto narrowed his eyes when his clone dispelled. He couldn't see what had killed it, but then the smoke cleared seconds later to reveal 2 very different animals. The first one appeared, at a glance, to be a normal ox. However, not only did it have a number of those strange metal rods piercing its head and legs, it was also massive. A rippling body covered in brown fur. Muscles bulged as it scuffed its hooves along the ground. 2 large horns, blacker than obsidian, jutted from its head, though one of its horns had snapped. While the ox charged at Naruto, the second creature, a large dog with brown fur that had a giant rod sticking through its head, growled as it took a more scenic route around him. Naruto watched it from the corner of his eye, but he focused most of his attention on the ox. It was clear they were trying to attack him with a pincer tactic. Suin Senpuken. Naruto charged as much wind-natured chakra through his fists as he dared. Then he unleashed 2 powerful thrusts, first with his right hand, and then with his left hand. His first fist-shaped wind jutsu slammed into the ox's face, halting the creature in its tracks. The second struck its left front leg. Naruto couldn't hear the bone snap from this distance, but he saw how his attack bent the creature's joint at an angle it wasn't supposed to go. Even though the ox went down with a great splash, Naruto was unable to finish it off because the dog with strange wings on its back was closing in. He saw it coming up behind him thanks to one of his clones dispelling. Rasengan. Naruto didn't hesitate to spin around and slam a Rasengan into the monster's muzzle. He thought that would pulverize its face, but then the creature suddenly split into two. Shock shot through him. However, Naruto quickly prepared himself for their counterattack, or he would have if something hadn't grabbed him from behind. As someone twisted his arms behind his back, Naruto turned his head and received another shock. The pain that his clone had killed was standing behind him. What the hell? He'd seen this man get pulverized by a wind-natured Rasengan. There was no way he should have still been alive. The two dogs quickly charged in to attack Naruto. Before they could, Naruto suddenly found himself standing several meters from where he had been. He barely had a moment to contemplate what happened before memories that were not his own appeared before him. Naruto saw his own death flash before his eyes, but it wasn't his. It was one of his clones. Replacement. Not wanting to waste this chance, Naruto created two clones and had them attack the two dogs and the man who'd somehow miraculously come back to life. The clones rushed forward. One created a Rasengan in its hand, while the other began helping craft and mold nature chakra into it. A loud shrieking soon echoed all around the battlefield as 4 points like a shuriken spun around the Rasengan. Futon. Rasenshuriken. The two clones slammed into the pain in the dogs. The entire area around them became engulfed in a giant dome of swirling, torrential wind chakra. Waves swelled as the jutsu pushed the water away. Naruto and the others had to stop fighting and leap away from the attack as a shockwave crashed into them. Staring into the swirling dome, everyone could see what the attack was capable of. Numerous glowing blue needles of chakra were stabbing into the pain and dog summons that had been trapped inside of the jutsu. Even the other 5 pains could do nothing but stare in silence as the powerful jutsu sliced into their comrade. So this is what the Rasenshuriken can do when used on a person, Fukusaku murmured from Jiraiya's shoulder. I remember seeing the results on a log, but it feels completely different being able to see what kind of damage it does to a body. It really is impressive, Shima mumbled as she gazed in awe from Jiraiya's other shoulder. It's an elemental attack of the highest caliber. The Rasenshuriken can slice through almost anything, but once it collides with something it can't slice through, it detonates, producing an incredible vortex of wind in the immediate area. Look at that. Look at all those wind blades that are being created. There's so many I doubt even a Sharingan would be able to count them all. That's not even the best part, Jiraiya said with a grunt as he held his shoulder. Blood dripped from the wound and splashed into the water. The wind blades damage anything within the vortex on a cellular level, attacking the chakra circulatory system to such a degree that no amount of medical ninjutsu can heal it. A truly fearsome technique, one of the pains, the one with spiky hair, said. I can see now how this boy managed to defeat so many of us. This is all the more reason why we must capture him here. Bansho Tenant, heavenly attraction of all creation. Pain raised his hand and suddenly, Naruto, who'd been standing over a dozen meters away, suddenly felt like something had yanked on his chest. He yelped as he was lifted off his feet and sent sailing toward the spiky-haired Pain. As if to make matters worse, the Pain that shot the strange missiles appeared before the other Pain. He threw off his cloak, revealing that his body was more machine than man. He had 6 arms that sprouted from his shoulders and 2 faces. A folded, serrated blade-like sash wrapped around his waist and acted like a tail. The strange-looking Pain leaned over like an animal preparing to attack. Oh, no you don't. Jiraiya shouted as he leapt into the air and created a massive Rasengan over his head. Senpo. Cho-Odama Rasengan, Sage Art. Ultra-big ball spiraling sphere. The Rasengan was gigantic, easily larger than Jiraiya's body. As he fell forward, he prepared to slam the Rasengan onto the machine-like Pain, but then the thicker Pain, who seemed somehow fatter than the others, appeared before Jiraiya and held out his hands. Jiraiya cut the jutsu. It disappeared before it could touch the fat Pain. Now falling without the Rasengan, Jiraiya crashed into the Pain with a powerful downward punch. A massive shockwave spread out from the point of impact as Jiraiya's fist crushed the Pain's head. His attack drove that Pain straight through the water, sending him spiraling deep into the lake as a geyser of water shot up all around them. While Jiraiya's attack distracted everyone, Naruto, still being yanked toward the 2 Pains, channeled wind chakra into his fists and attacked the machine-like Pain. Suin Senpuken. Unlike the time where he attacked the summon, Naruto launched his fists forward at the same time. Each punch was aimed differently. The first attack knocked the serrated tail away, the metal becoming twisted, bent, and warped. The second attack slammed into Pain's head, causing it to snap backward. This didn't seem to kill it. Several missiles were launched from its wrists and traveled toward Naruto, but he spun around and generated more wind chakra, which pushed the missiles away, sending them into an out-of-control tailspin. The missiles struck the lake instead of him, detonating and sending up small geysers of water. Rasengan. Naruto landed on the ground in front of the machine Pain, cut the wind chakra he'd been generating, and slammed a Rasengan into the man's chest. Loud shrieking emitted from around him. The Rasengan ground the machine Pain's skin apart, revealing the man's metal insides beneath the skin. Seconds later, the machine-like Pain was lifted off his feet and sailed backward like one of those rockets it launched from its wrist. Wearing a grin, Naruto looked at the spiky-haired Pain. All right, now it's time for, what the shit fuck. Before he could even think of attacking the spiky-haired Pain, 4 giant dogs suddenly attacked him from all sides. Naruto leapt into the air to avoid being mowed apart like a chew toy. The 4 dogs ended up slamming into each other, but instead of turning into a pile of limbs, they amalgamated, becoming one dog with 4 heads. Damn it, I thought I killed this thing. Naruto felt a snarled tear from his throat as the dog leapt at him. Grimacing, he flipped around like an acrobat and channeled wind chakra into his heel. Go away. Using a technique similar to what Shizuka could do, Naruto sliced straight through the dog's summons like it was made of wheat and his foot was a scythe. However, once again, his attack didn't seem to hurt it at all. Instead of being killed, the dog split apart into 4 again. All 4 landed on the water at the same time he did, surrounding him again. Damn it, what the hell is going on here? Why won't these things die? Naruto had never heard of a summon like this before. No matter what he did to it, no matter which attack he used, nothing seemed to work. Even the most powerful attack in his arsenal, the Rasenshuriken, had done nothing more than cause this beast to multiply. Maybe I shouldn't be attacking the summon. If all it's going to do is make the monster multiply, then perhaps what I should be attacking is the summoner. Jiraiya was currently keeping 2 of the other Pains busy, the one with long hair and the one that looked like more machine than man. Meanwhile, the spiky-haired Pain was just standing there like a statue. There was one other Pain behind him. That one also had spiky hair, but his face was thicker. He had a bigger nose and more masculine jawline. Where's the summoner? Using wind-enhanced punches and kicks to push the dogs back, Naruto leapt into the air and glanced around before spotting the long-haired summoning Pain several meters below. He was standing away from the battle proper. Creating 3 shadow clones, Naruto had the first one dispel. The other 2 created a Rasengan in each hand and began attacking the dog summons. While this was going on, one of the Naruto clones that he had first created and had hide across the battlefield appeared behind the summoning Pain. It emerged from beneath the water and slammed a Suin Senpuken into its back. The attack was powerful enough that the Pain was launched forward similar to how Naruto had been pulled toward the 2 Pains by that strange technique, Bansho Tenin. Naruto angled his descend, and then flipped around as he extended his leg. A green aura appeared around it as he generated more wind chakra. Kazakata, wind cutter. Naruto's heel drop struck the summoner on the head, and then, infused with the cutting power of wind chakra, it split the head open like it was an overripe fruit. The Pain who could summon fell forward. He struck with water with a splash. Meanwhile, the dog summons disappeared in a burst of smoke. Landing on the water, Naruto stood to his feet and turned around, prepared to help Jiraiya. And that's when it happened. Chibaku Tensai, heavenly body bursting from the earth. Naruto couldn't figure out what was happening. A bright light emitted from overhead, rays of light that shone down on the lake in Imegakure no Sato. Then, all of the water turned into streamers that were pulled into a black sphere that hovered above them. It wasn't just the water either. The buildings along the edge of Imegakure no Sato, the ground beneath the lake, all of it crumbled apart and began slowly being drawn toward the sphere. Doing his best to move away from the strange jutsu, Naruto began running across the water, but the water was getting pulled into the sphere. It wasn't long before the water underneath his feet left the ground. He leapt from the water. A massive chunk of land suddenly appeared before him. He landed on it and tried to find an escape route, but numerous other chunks were floating all around him, blocking him from escaping. In that case, I need to make my own escape route. He'd been hoping to save this for when he was certain he could defeat this Pain character, but it looked like he had no choice. Naruto activated his yokai form. There was nothing special required in its activation. All Naruto did was release every limiter that kept his chakra from overflowing. A soft clicking noise echoed throughout his mind, like a lock being undone, and then a powerful chakra suddenly flowed through his body like a storm. It leaked out of his skin. Wisps of purple chakra that looked almost like miasma wafted from his body. The ground beneath his feet cracked from the overflowing power. While he couldn't see his transformation happening, Naruto knew his hair was growing longer, that his eyes had become purple, and that his hands and feet were turning into claws. The transformation didn't take more than a second. Once it was done, Naruto held out his left hand. A swirling sphere of purple chakra appeared in front of him. It looked a lot like a Rasengan, but it was more chaotic. Chakra leaked from it like water leaking from the cracks in a vase. Naruto narrowed his eyes and focused his will, condensing the sphere further, until it was no more than a tiny pinprick. Raisinite, Spiral Shooter. Naruto growled out the name of his technique as he slammed his fist into the tiny sphere. All of the condensed chakra suddenly erupted from the condensed Rasengan, but instead of creating a massive burst of energy, it fired off a condensed beam that sliced through the rocks around it. Naruto controlled the beam's angle, making it swerve around and cut more. The rocks around him suddenly broke apart like fragile glass. Kei's Bakufu, Wind Blast. Slamming his hands onto the ground, Naruto summoned a massive blast of wind that spread outward like a powerful shockwave. The rocks, already broken apart from his previous attack, were blown away in all directions. His path now clear, Naruto leapt away from the strange technique as more and more rocks, buildings, and water were pulled into it. He landed on solid ground. It seemed odd at first, but then he looked around and realized what had happened. The lake was gone. All of the water had been pulled into the now giant sphere, which looked like a strange globe of the planet. Water mixed with land to create oceans and continents on the sphere. Meanwhile, the land around Naruto had become deformed. Chunks of earth were missing, numerous buildings in Omegakure were gone, and all of the water in the lake had been sucked dry. I did not expect you to be able to escape from my Chibaku Tensai, a voice said. Naruto turned around to find the six Pains standing a distance of several meters from him. The one who had spoken was the spiky-haired man. You are truly a powerful foe, and that unique transformation of yours, I have never seen anything like it. Yeah, well, what can I say? When you're as awesome as me, it's only natural to have super cool transformations like this. Naruto's long hair shifted as he turned his head slightly to look away, always keeping at least one eye on the man. He frowned when he spotted no one else aside from these six. It looked like the dogs were gone, which he had first assumed was because he'd defeated the one who summoned them, but that man was standing right in front of him again as if he'd come back to life. I don't understand. I'm sure I defeated that guy several times, and not just him. Eros Sennin and I have killed at least 2 of 3 of these guys. How did they keep coming back to life? One of those 6 must have been able to use a powerful revival ninjutsu. It was the only explanation that Naruto could think of. The question was, which of those 6 was the one who kept reviving the others? If you were looking for Jiraiya-sensei, then you shouldn't bother, Pain said again. You might have been able to escape from my jutsu, but he was not so fortunate. What? It took Naruto a minute to figure out what the man meant, mostly because his brain simply couldn't comprehend it. Jiraiya had been sucked up by that thing. There was no way. It wasn't possible. It just wasn't. And yet, I can see that you don't believe me, but it's true. The Pain who seemed to be the spokesperson for the others spread his arms. Look around you. Do you see Jiraiya-sensei anywhere? No, you do not. That is because he was unable to escape from my technique. Naruto couldn't say anything. His throat refused to open as a series of denials rang out inside of his mind. Impossible. Jiraiya might have been a pervert, but he was also strong. He should have been strong enough to escape from a technique like that. I am surprised that you were able to escape from this technique. Pain regarded him with a calm, steady gaze that pissed off Naruto more than he thought possible. Chibaku Tensai was a technique created by the Sage of Six Paths, the Rikudo Sennin. It was said that he used this technique to create the moon. My power is nothing compared to his, but this jutsu is still one of the most powerful in my arsenal. Even though he heard the man speak, Naruto couldn't respond. He stared at the massive sphere floating in the sky. Jiraiya was in there, according to this man. He was stuck inside that thing. Naruto had no idea how this technique worked, but even if his sensei hadn't been crushed to death, he would suffocate before long. Arrow Sennin. Chakra flared from Naruto's feet as he launched himself into the air and crashed into the giant sphere. Rasengan. The Rasengan drilled into the rock, but it must have been condensed more than he thought. His attack barely scratched it. Gritting his teeth, Naruto channeled wind chakra into his jutsu. Futon. Rasengan. The wind-natured Rasengan did a slightly better job of cutting through the rock, but he was unable to maintain the jutsu for long. It eventually started slicing into not only the rock but also his hand. Naruto howled as he withdrew his hand and then summoned an even bigger Rasengan, one that emitted a loud screeching sound as four pointed blades spun fiercely around it. Futon. Rasenshuriken. Naruto didn't hesitate to slam the Rasenshuriken into the massive sphere. In most cases, his attack would have sliced through the rock with ease. That didn't happen this time. His jutsu, unable to even pierce the attack, exploded the moment he slammed it into the sphere. Naruto was blasted off his feet. The wind howled around his ears for several seconds as the sights blurred past him. Then, all at once, the oxygen was blown from his lungs as his back slammed into the hard ground. He stared up at the still floating dome, which not even his Rasenshuriken had been able to penetrate. All that he had to show for his jutsu was a little chunk that had been cut away. It is no use, Pain said. Your jutsu cannot penetrate my Chibaku Tensai. Are you upset? Do you feel the pain of losing your sensei? This pain that you feel has been felt by others for a long time, longer than you or I have been alive. This pain is the same pain that your village has inflicted on smaller villages like Omegakure ever since the formation of the hidden villages. Do you understand how we feel now? If you do, then you are one step closer to reaching enlightenment, not that it will help you in the long run. I am going to take the Kyuubi away from you. Your sacrifice will help further my ambitions. The words felt like they were coming from far away, from across a vast distance. They were distorted. Naruto heard them, but they barely registered as he continued staring at the sphere. Jiraiya was in there. Was he alive? Was he dead? Naruto didn't know. He was uncertain, and that uncertainty caused kernels of fear to fester inside of him. Like the vines of an insidious plant, they spread throughout his body, until every positive emotion he'd ever felt was snuffed out. Are you angry? A seductive voice whispered. Yes. Do you want to take revenge? I do. Then let go. I'll destroy this man for you. Naruto listened to the voice, which told him that it could help him get revenge for his sensei. He listened and let himself go. He gave in. RRRAHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHThe ground around him burst, exploding in all directions. 5 of the 6 pains scattered to avoid the flying debris, but the one with spiky hair held up his hands and created a barrier. Large rock chunks slammed into the barrier. The man's feet dug into the ground. Cracks spread as each flying piece of debris crashed into him. Naruto climbed to his feet, body shaking, back hunched. His arms dangled uselessly in front of him as the chakra, more black than purple now, gushed from his body like a tempest. The very air around him sizzled. As if gravity had suddenly become unstable, large chunks of the earth were ripped from the ground. They floated around him for several seconds before breaking apart. Before long, the chakra swirling around Naruto gathered. It condensed along his body, covering it like a layer of armor. His skin became a dark purple bordering on black, though several purple lines, brighter than the rest, appeared along his body like strange seals. His pupils disappeared. There was only white. Similarly, when Naruto opened his mouth, all that could be seen was a white maw. Fingers extended, elongating and growing sharp. His feet did the same. Then it happened. A tail sprouted from behind Naruto. It was just a single tail, but then the tail split into a second tail. Not long after that, the 2 tails split into 4 tails, and then 4 became 8. They seemed to stop at 8. Something is not right. Pain frowned as he narrowed his eyes. This chakra is far denser than a human's, but it does not feel like the Kyuubi's chakra. What is this? Perhaps it was his words, or maybe it was simply his presence, but the demonic-looking Naruto turned to him. It glared at him with white eyes. Then it opened its mouth, and unleashed a roar that shattered the barrier he'd put up and crashed into him with a force that was even greater than his own Shinra Tensei. Pain was lifted off his feet and sent flying. XOX. People screamed as explosion after explosion tore apart the city of Omegakure. While some unease had spread after Pain used Chibaku Tensei, it is nothing compared to the chaos taking place in the streets now. Over here, a woman was screaming as she ran with a crying child in her arms. Over there, an old man was nearly trampled as dozens of younger people pushed and shoved to get away from where the destruction was occurring. Everywhere Conan looked, people were suffering. Everyone remained calm. Conan shouted over the screams. Do not push as you make your way toward the city exit. Conan had lost Naruto at some point during their battle, and then the boy had become engaged in combat with Pain alongside Jiraiya. Fighting the two of them at once had been far too much. Even Pain, easily the strongest person she knew, couldn't seem to land a decisive victory over the two, and they had torn through his paths with ease. It was only thanks to the Naraka path, which had the ability to completely rejuvenate the other paths after they had been destroyed, that Pain had lasted for so long. Had the battle continued, Jiraiya and Naruto would have discovered the secret to the reviving paths. Conan was sure of it. Pain must have known that as well. That was why he had used Chibaku Tensei, to put an end to the fight. More explosions rocked the village. They hadn't reached this part of AIM yet, but the battle was steadily moving inward. The numerous detonations caused many of the citizens to scream, though Conan did her best to keep everyone calm and orderly as they rushed toward one of the exits that would take them out of the city. She never thought they would have to do this. Conan had several dozen paper clones spread throughout the city. They were also helping evacuate the civilians. A few had been destroyed, but all of them had been able to safely evacuate the people from that area before harm could befall them. As she looked at the area where the detonations were taking place, a grim expression settled over her face. Nagato. XOX. The first thing Naruto did after that strange chakra exploded from his body and made him transform was attack the Naraka path. He seemed to understand how Pain had kept reviving his paths, or maybe it had been sheer luck. The Kyuubi's Jinchuriki fired off numerous spheres of condensed chakra at the path, though Diva had appeared to block the attacks, not that it had done much good. Several tails had suddenly speared out of the ground next to Naraka and skewered him. He fights like an animal. Diva narrowed his eyes as Animal summoned the drill-beaked bird and giant centipede. The two summons tried to attack Naruto. They never got even close. Naruto opened his mouth, dark chakra gathering inside, and then he fired off a massive beam of destruction that engulfed the two summons and Animal. The connection that all the paths shared with Animal was suddenly cut. When the giant beam attack dissipated, there was nothing left. Shinra Tensei. Diva held out his hand and used his repulsion attack to send Naruto flying, or he tried to. Even he couldn't stop the shock from coursing down his spine when, rather than find himself being lifted off his feet and sent across the dry lake bed, Naruto dug his hands and feet into the ground to somehow remain in place. Perhaps acting on instinct, or maybe even just malice, Naruto's head swiveled in Diva's direction. Another beam of energy was fired from his mouth. This one was condensed. It was much smaller, but there was a lot more chakra packed into it, evident by how the ground melted simply from its passing. Hands raised, Diva erected a barrier. The beam slammed into the barrier. Diva gnashed his teeth together as his feet slid across the ground. It was incredible. Even though he was using chakra to keep himself from moving, the force of Naruto's attack was pushing him back. Is this the power of the Kyuubi? Diva wondered, and then shook his head. No, this chakra is very dense and powerful, but it is not the Kyuubi's chakra. What made the boy's power so shocking was that this was not the Kyuubi's power. It all belonged to Naruto. Still, he had never felt a chakra this powerful from a human before. It was thick and dense. If other people's chakra was like water, then this was like sludge. While Diva was blocking the powerful beam attack, Asura pulled off his arm to reveal and fire a cluster of segmented missiles. Each one targeted Naruto. However, the boy didn't move from his spot. Even as the beam fizzled out, the massive aura around the boy, which looked like purple flames so dark they bordered on black, became even more dense. The missiles struck the aura and detonated. The powerful explosion that engulfed Naruto was blown away when the boy raced through it. Asura didn't even have time to dodge before Naruto grabbed the path with his clawed hand and proceeded to crush his face. Metal squealed as the face slowly crumbled and caved in. Asura's tail rose as though to try and skewer Naruto, but before it could get even close, the boy created a Rasengan and slammed it into the path's chest. Pain had seen this attack several times already. He knew how it worked. However, unlike what normally happened, this jutsu didn't grind anything away. The moment the Rasengan touched Asura, the body of his path exploded. Parts scattered in all directions. All that remained was the head, gripped fiercely in Naruto's hand, until he crushed it completely. 3 of my paths have been destroyed. The thought left a bad taste in his mouth. It only grew worse when Naruto vanished in a burst of mind-blowing speed. Diva could track him, and he did not hesitate to use his attraction ability to pull the boy toward him. He was forced to cut the power off, however, when Naruto created several vacuum blades that nearly cut through him. Now free from the attraction jutsu, Naruto appeared before Human, a path that had very little power on the field of battle. Human tried to defend himself using taijutsu. His hands were cleanly removed by a swipe of Naruto's claws. Not even a second later, one of those same clawed hands speared through Human's chest. Down to just his Diva and Preta paths, Pain tried to figure out what he could do to turn this battle around. Going on a hunch, Preta rushed toward Naruto and reached out a hand. He clasped the blonde's wrist and began absorbing chakra. It was overwhelmingly intense. A massive wellspring of energy surged through the connection shared by the paths and the one who controlled them. It filled them with more chakra than they'd ever had. It was Pain's hope that Preta would be able to absorb most of Naruto's chakra, but, sadly, those hopes were dashed when their opponent unleashed an enraged roar and tore Preta's head clean from his body. As the path fell to the ground, Diva found himself standing alone. XOX. Ha, ha. Deep within a megacre, in a building with no windows and no exits, Nagato sat on his chair, though the massive contraption that wrapped around his lower half to keep him upright could hardly be called as such. Ha, ah. He breathed heavily, his voice raspy. The power that had flowed through the Preta path, having been absorbed from Naruto, was doing weird things to his body. It felt like he was being healed and destroyed at the same time. It was not a pleasant experience. At the same time, he did his best to control the Diva path, which was still facing off against Naruto. Nagato, a voice said before a figure appeared from the entrance to the darkened room. Blue hair, amber eyes, and a flower on her head. Conan walked over to him in concern. Conan, I believe the situation is lost, Conan said hesitantly. We should leave. Not yet, Nagato muttered. If nothing else, I must capture the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki. He is too dangerous to leave alone. If we do not capture him now, we may not get the chance. Even lost as he was in the darkness, Nagato could still tell when Conan was agitated. Her face clearly said that she wanted to convince him to leave, that she wanted to force him to abandon this place, but that same face, filled with resignation, also said she knew that wouldn't happen. After a second, the conflicted expression disappeared. The woman walked over and stood beside him. You should probably leave, Nagato said. I am staying right here. Nagato knew better than to order her to leave. She almost always listened to what he said, but there were some things she wouldn't budge on. Have the people been evacuated? He asked. They have. Then I guess I should try to end this now. If the people had been evacuated, then it meant he could fight without restraint. A megacre would be destroyed. However, he considered that a fair exchange in return for capturing the most powerful and troublesome Jinchuriki. XOX. The battle continued. Naruto was like an animal, attacking Pain with nothing but base instincts. He charged at the final path, the Diva path, with little thought. Shinra Tensai. The repulsion jutsu slammed into Naruto. It halted him in his tracks. Naruto's face, which seemed oddly elastic, flattened as the beast-like Jinchuriki struggled to rush forward. He lifted one clawed foot, brought it down, and then lifted his other foot. Inch by inch he moved. Diva's eyes became narrowed slits as he put more chakra into his jutsu. Ha! The chakra Diva exerted was enough to lifted Naruto off his feet and send the boy flying. They had made their way into the city by this point. Their battle had destroyed many buildings. Towering skyscrapers had crumbled to the ground, Small structures had exploded in gouts of fire and plumes of smoke. Naruto slammed into one of the already broken structures, sending a large spray of fragments flying everywhere. Diva couldn't see what became of the boy, but the massive skyscraper behind the building Naruto had slammed into suddenly teetered. Cracks spread along the bottom as it leaned over, broke, and then crumbled to the ground. The building's destruction caused a massive cloud of dust to billow through the streets. Diva kept his eyes focused and tried to find out where Naruto was. He didn't doubt for a second that the boy was still alive. Just then, a massive beam burst from the dust cloud. He raised his hand and blocked it, channeling chakra to his feet to stick to the ground. With a furious shout, he manipulated his barrier, angling it away from him and forced the beam to rebound off it. This made it much easier to deflect, though the beam itself sliced through several buildings as if they were made of cheese. While the beam eventually died off, several sphere-like projectiles of negative chakra shot toward him. Diva moved his arms faster than ever before. They were practically blurs as he smacked the projectiles away. Naruto burst out of the dust cloud seconds later. Diva prepared to send him flying again with Shinra Tensei, but the Jinchuriki was on him before he could even get the words out. The taijutsu battle that began was more furious than any fight he'd been in to date. Naruto was an animal in every sense of the word, clawing and attacking with reckless abandon. If that were all, the Diva path would have probably been enough, but on top of having completely unpredictable attack patterns, Naruto also possessed bone-shattering strength. Diva raised his arms in a cross to block Naruto's punch, a shockwave exploding from the impact, lifting Diva off his feet. Naruto leapt after him, continuing his furious assault. Diva blocked his attacks. Small shockwaves erupted from each attack and counterattack as the two traded blows while in mid-air. Ha! Unleashing a powerful burst of chakra, Diva sent Naruto soaring backward. The boy landed on the ground, crouched on all fours, and fired off another one of those beams from his mouth. Diva blocked the attack with another barrier. Even so, he could feel the heat singing his hands as he was pushed higher into the air. Holding out his hands toward Omegakure no Sato, Diva inhaled a deep breath and channeled far more chakra than normal for his next jutsu. Shinra Tensei. The attack struck Naruto dead on. This jutsu, which allowed him the ability to manipulate repulsive force, Sekiryoku, acted like a giant hammer slamming into the earth. Naruto was crushed beneath the attack, which quickly spread further. Buildings were pushed away before shattering into so many fragments as a massive crater about 50-meter wide formed in the village of Omegakure no Sato. Diva narrowed his eyes as he slowed his descent and landed on the ground. Standing at the lip of the crater, he surveyed the destruction he had wrought, though his eyes slowly focused on the writhing mass of purple chakra buried underneath tons of rubble. As though affected by gravity, his lips slowly morphed into a frown. Naruto's chakra had not diminished in the least. Not only had it not diminished, but it seemed to be growing more powerful with each passing second. What made it even more unbelievable was that this didn't seem to be Kyuubi's chakra at all. It was still Naruto's. Where is he getting this power from? There was no one who could answer his question, certainly the one who his question was about wouldn't answer, even if he could. A massive explosion sent plumes of fire, smoke, and fragments of the ground and buildings sky high. Naruto stood up. He appeared unharmed. Diva could not see a single wound on his body, which looked more monster than man, covered as it was in demonic-looking purple chakra armor. It seems I have no choice. Diva looked at the results of his Chibaku Tensei, still hovering in the air. Focusing on it, he raised his hand and channeled his chakra. HNNN. Sweat beaded on Diva's brow as he yanked the massive sphere of compressed earth and water down. It fell toward Naruto, who raised his head. A beam fired from his mouth, but though it carved a large chunk from the sphere, it could not destroy it. The satellite, which was easily over 30 meters in diameter, slammed into Naruto, crushing him once more. That won't hold him. Knowing this, the Diva Path placed his hands together and summoned more chakra. A small orb slowly formed between his hands. It looked white at first, but the core soon became pure black. Raising his hand, he sent it into the air as though making an offering to the gods. The tiny sphere slowly ascended into the air, seemingly harmless. Just as the sphere stopped moving, the satellite that had been created from his previous Chibaku Tensei cracked in half. The two halves fell away from each other. A figure leapt from the crack and landed on one flattened half. Of course it was Naruto, still transformed into that monstrous form. The beast looked around. It was like Naruto's head was on a swivel. However, slowly, almost mechanically, Naruto eventually craned his neck to look at him. He opened his mouth and gathered chakra around it. No doubt he was preparing another one of those beam attacks. It was too late. Diva clapped his hands together. Chibaku Tensai. He had never used this technique twice before. In fact, due to the chakra requirements, he tried his hardest not to use it at all. The strain it put on his body, his real body and not the diva path, was immense. However, thanks to the chakra the Preta path had stolen from Naruto before it was destroyed, he had enough to use the jutsu again, stronger than the last time. All the buildings around him cracked and crumbled as they rose into the air. The ground ruptured as if something from underground was rising to the surface. Abrasions appeared as the streets and rock swelled, broke, and rose into the air as well, all traveling toward the small gravitational sphere. Naruto leapt off the hemisphere he'd been standing on as it also broke apart and was sucked toward the new Chibaku Tensai. However, Diva sent a powerful burst of chakra toward him. Naruto slammed into the ground as the earth enclosed around him, though it didn't remain that way for long. A beam of energy blasted from the enclosed sphere of rock. Diva raised his hand to block the attack, which seared his fingers, and then sent a portion of that attack back at Naruto. It didn't seem to injure the boy. However, it did distract him. The ground that he was standing on rose into the air. HHAAAA. Diva clamped his hands together and sent more chakra into his technique. More buildings were ripped from the ground and became part of the satellite. Even with the state he was in, Naruto must have realized the danger of this technique. Beams struck the satellite, destroying large portions, but Diva merely summoned more chakra, pulling more and more of the ground from the earth and using it to repair the satellite. Soon, Naruto slammed into the satellite's surface, and then Diva decided to finish it. Nung GGG ha. Before Naruto even had a chance to lift his hand, Diva applied so much chakra that the pieces of debris floating through the air shot forward like kunai and slammed into him. Over and over, more and more, Diva forced the satellite to compress further, to become more dense, then sent more debris into it and compressed it again. He did this several times. Finally, with one last application of chakra, the jutsu was complete. A satellite 3 times larger than the one that had defeated Jiraiya now floated in the air. XOX. The underground bunker that housed Nagato and Konan was now visible. The Chibaku Tensai had ripped most of the ground around them apart. The building they'd been underneath was no more. Konan stood before the gaping chasm that allowed her a glimpse at the world outside, staring in shock at the massive satellite floating above the now destroyed village. Behind her, Nagato's heavy rasping created staccato echoes around the space. With a worried look on her face, Konan turned back to Nagato, whose emaciated form was more visible now that their room had been exposed to the outside world. Her friend was hunched over. Bony shoulders and arms extended at his side, stuck into a pair of large cylindrical devices that were further connected to a massive structure behind him with wires. She could see his ribcage. The stark shadows cast over his body revealed all of his deformities and nearly skeletal appearance. Nagato had never looked more pained than he did now. His face was lined with exhaustion. Bags hung under his eyes. The strain from using Chibaku Tensai must have physically damaged his brain because blood was running from his nose. "Why did you push yourself to make it that large?" she asked. "That boy is far stronger than Jiraiya-sensei." Nagato took several deep breaths. "Even without the Kyuubi's chakra, he is far more powerful than anyone I have ever faced. A normal Chibaku Tensai would have never worked." Grunting, Nagato lifted his head and gazed at the satellite visible through the gaping hole in the ground. "The Rikudo Sennin was said to have created the moon," he said without humor. "This is nothing compared to that." He looked back down. "Regardless, with this, I have now captured the Kyuubi." However, as if seeking to prove him wrong, an explosion suddenly echoed all around them. Nagato and Konan looked up as red flames became visible through the cracks in the Chibaku Tensai. More explosions rang out. Plumes of fire from inside of the satellite blasted chunk after chunk away. Several limbs speared through the satellite. They were tails. However, they were not physical tails. They were merely constructs made of condensed chakra. The tails were soon followed by a set of hands, which clawed apart the rocks and building fragments, allowing a figure to emerge. It was Naruto. Though he retained his bipedal form, he still looked nothing like a human. His hair had become a dark red, the color of blood. It hung around his head like a thick mane. His eyes were still pure white with no pupils, and when he opened his mouth to release a beam that struck the ruins of a megachur, the inside was also white. Observing all this from inside Nagato's room, Conan's eyes widened. I never imagined he would be this powerful. Nagato stared at the emerging Naruto as he clawed his way out. I have no idea how a human can be like this, nor what that form of his is. The tails seem to represent the Kyuubi, but I can feel none of the Kyuubi's chakra being used. Conan whirled around to face Nagato. What are we going to do? I do not know. For the first time, Nagato expressed uncertainty. I never imagined that I would be forced to expend this much chakra. I do not have enough to create another Chibaku Tensai. I do not even know if I have enough to continue fighting. Nagato's eyes narrowed in frustration. His chakra hasn't diminished in the least. Conan heard those words and stumbled back as though struck by fear. Her horrified gaze turned back to Naruto. What kind of monster is he? I do not know. Nagato had no idea what he was going to do, but it wasn't like he could just give up either. He had a bit of chakra left. Maybe he could somehow pull off a miracle and defeat this creature. As he was preparing to begin the battle once again, a soft glow caught his attention. He looked down to find the skin around his collarbone glowing. With a frown, he continued watching as the glow slowly condensed and gained shape. It became a necklace. It was an innocuous-looking necklace made out of a simple gemstone that glittered in the light. He'd never seen anything like this. Where had it come from? What was it doing around his neck? A loud roar shattered his concentration. He looked up, expecting an attack, but what he found was far different, and far more confusing. Naruto was clutching his head as he knelt on the surface of the Chibaku Tensai satellite. His mouth was split open to unleash a scream filled with rage and pain, a tortured scream that seemed to encompass humanity's most negative emotions. However, beyond the anger, beyond the pain, another emotion seemed to resound from the scream, an emotion that resonated with Nagato and caused him to unconsciously clench the necklace that had suddenly appeared around his neck. What is going on? Conan wondered out loud. However, Nagato didn't answer her as he continued to look at Naruto, who seemed almost like he was in a fight with himself. The emotion that he heard in Naruto's scream, which kept him from speaking, was sorrow. XOX. Naruto recognized the street he was standing on, the buildings on either side, the tower several hundred meters away, and the massive monument looming over everything behind it. A sense of familiarity surged through him. This place, which looked exactly like Konoha, was, in fact, a replica created by the seal that kept the Kyuubi, Akane, locked away inside of him. How did I get here? He had been trying to enter the seal for over a year now with no luck. Why had he entered the seal now? As he walked along the deserted streets, his feet taking him to where he knew Akane resided, he tried to figure out what he was doing here. He'd been fighting against pain alongside Jiraiya, and then Ero Sennin. Naruto gritted his teeth as he stopped walking. He struggled to hold back the emotions pouring from him, to keep his sorrow in check. That's it, a voice whispered to him. Just like that. Let your sorrow, your anger, your rage flow through you. You want to take revenge, right? You want to destroy the person who killed your sensei, right? Then just give yourself to despair. I'll do the rest. It had been a long time since he'd heard that voice, but not long enough that he had forgotten it. Feeling a jolt race through his spine, Naruto quickened his pace, racing through the streets before, eventually, even those faded away to present a wide, open space. The last time he had visited this place, Akane's seal had been a small house, a one-story building with no outstanding features other than the numerous seals surrounding it. Inside had been a single room. Big enough for one person, the room had many comfortable amenities, including a bed, a dresser, and several other pieces of furniture that the house's resident never actually seemed to use. That was gone now. The house was gone. In its place was a stone pillar with a height of at least 4 meters and a width of 2. It emerged from the ground like a stake set to skewer the sky. Wide at the bottom, it grew more narrow the further up it went, ending in a sharp point. What's more, There were numerous seals scribbled onto the rock's surface, and in the center of those seals was Akane. Tied to the pillar with dozens of chains, Akane's body hung limply, her feet dangling, toes canted. Her arms had been wrapped above her head. One set of chains wrapped around her beasts as if the person who'd tied her up was a pervert. At the sound of his voice, Akane lifted her head up. Her eyes widened slightly as she locked onto him. Naruto ran toward her, but she shouted at him. "Don't come any closer. It's a trap." "What?" Naruto had barely spoken those words when something slammed into his stomach with enough force that he was lifted off the ground. All of the oxygen was violently expelled from his lungs as he flew through the air. He struck the ground seconds later and nearly swallowed his tongue. Struggling to get to his feet, Naruto looked up as several mocking claps rang out. "I'm impressed. Despite having barely any forewarning, you managed to mitigate the damage my punch would have given you at the last moment by traveling with the hit. You've become even more skilled as a ninja, but then again, so have I." Naruto did not recognize the man standing above him. Spiky red hair traveled down his back like mane. The dark red hair bordering on crimson somehow complemented the person's pale skin, which was white enough that it almost seemed translucent. He wore only a pair of pants, meaning his body, which was covered in strong but lithe muscles, was on display. His hands and feet were clawed. However, what captured Naruto's attention the most were his eyes. The area that would normally be white were black, and the pupils were a bloody crimson. Who? What's this? You don't remember me?" The man placed a hand against his chest in feigned agony. "I'm hurt, brother. Has it really been so long that you'd forget about me?" Naruto recognized the voice, of course, but he couldn't match up the figure before him with the person the voice belonged to. His dark half. That person had looked like a carbon copy of Naruto. Save for their eyes and the other Naruto's feral appearance, the two of them had looked exactly the same. "You're my other half." "No way. Call me Yami," his dark half said. "I prefer that name to dark half. You and I might be two sides of the same coin, but we are most definitely not the same person, as you are about to witness." As Naruto stood on shaking legs, Yami made several hand seals, finishing on the bird seal. The moment he did that, the seals on the pillar started glowing. At the same time, Akane screamed in agony and writhed within the chains. "What are you doing? Stop that. Ha ha ha. Why should I stop? This bitch is only getting what she deserves." Akane continued to scream and struggle. Naruto tried to rush over to her, but several chains sprouted from the ground and wrapped around his arms and legs. I can't have you going to her. That would mess up my plans. Just wait there for a minute. This will be finished shortly." Unable to do anything, all Naruto could do was watch as Akane's screams echoed around them, as the woman writhed in pain, as her body shook and strained against the bindings. Red chakra leaked from her body. Like a streamer drifting in the wind, the chakra drifted over to Yami, entering his body and engulfing him in bright red flames. As he watched, Naruto noticed that Akane no longer had 9 tails. She had 8. Even as he looked, the 8th tail disappeared. "I see. That seal must be absorbing her power. He's stealing her power." Naruto didn't know how that was possible, though he had some theories. Right then, however, Naruto had no intention of trying to determine whether those theories were correct. His other half, Yami, had clearly become a dangerous individual. I feel so much better now," Yami muttered as he felt the power flow through him. Clenching and unclenching his hands, Yami stared at them for several seconds, as though marveling at his newfound power, before he finally looked at Naruto. "And now that I'm feeling good, let's enjoy our time together, brother." Naruto wasn't given a chance to say anything as Yami suddenly appeared before him. Stars exploded in his vision as something powerful struck the underside of his chin. His feet left the ground. The chains wrapped around him all shattered as though they were made of brittle twigs. Flying through the air, Naruto did his best to rotate his body so he would land on his feet, but he still tumbled along the ground for several meters before landing in a crouch. He looked up to try and spot Yami. However, he was unable to see the man. There was nothing in front of him. Frowning, he looked left, and then right. Still nothing. Yami had all but disappeared, which meant, acting on instinct, Naruto rolled forward across the ground. A loud crash echoed behind him. Landing on his feet, Naruto turned around to see that the area he'd been standing on had become a small crater. Yami retracted his foot from the crater and looked up at Naruto. Your instincts are pretty sharp, I'll give you that. However, it's hopeless. There's no way you can keep up with me. As if to emphasize his point, Yami suddenly vanished before Naruto's eyes. Even though he had no idea where his opponent would strike next, he knew that he needed to react, so he leapt out of the way. He was just in time. Barely a second had passed before the area was destroyed. Yami had fallen from the sky and slammed into the ground with the fury of a hurricane. You really do have some sharp instincts, Yami complimented as he stood up. It's too bad those won't save you. What soon began was a game of intense cat and mouse. Yami would disappear and attack Naruto, who did his best to defend against the onslaught of incredibly fast and agile attacks. Each attack barely missed. Naruto could feel Yami's punches, or rather, he could feel the displaced air that was pushing against him every time Yami threw a punch. Several of his attacks were so sharp they cut Naruto's cheek as they passed. Naruto was unable to counterattack Yami, who relentlessly attacked over and over at speeds he could barely follow. In their previous battle, he and Yami were almost even in terms of ability. However, with Akane's power fueling his strength, Yami was currently in a league of his own. Naruto avoided a leg sweep by shuffling backward. However, he was shocked when Yami raised himself into a handstand and launched a powerful mule kick. Nothing seemed to happen at first. Then, without warning, an invisible wall slammed into Naruto, who was unable to do anything as he was thrown across the ground. Lying on his back, Naruto tried to stand up, but before he could even so much as sit, a foot slammed into his chest and pinned him to the ground. Despite this, Naruto still tried to remove the foot. However, when the heel ground into him, digging into his flesh, he could do nothing except throw his head back and scream. This is pathetic, Yami mumbled. To think you had been giving me so much trouble for such a long time. Well, now that I have all of Akane's power, you're nothing more than a nuisance. I hope you've enjoyed the time you spent on the outside because now it's my turn. I might not be able to kill you, but I'm going to lock you away into the deepest, darkest recesses of our mind, just like you did to me. Naruto groaned as he tried to move. He grabbed at the foot pinning him to the ground, but it wouldn't budge. Is this it? Gritting his teeth as he struggled to get up, Naruto wondered if this was the end. Am I really going to disappear here? Naruto didn't want that. He had far too much that he needed to accomplish. There was still so much that he hadn't seen. I don't want to vanish here, I can't. Well, it's been fun, brother, Yami said with a grin, but I'm gonna have to ask you to disappear now. Naruto gnashed his teeth together as the helplessness of his situation sank in. He really couldn't do anything. This man, this Yami, was far too powerful for him to confront alone and defeat. With Akane's chakra combined with his own, he made for an incredibly powerful opponent. Yami raised a clawed hand as though getting ready to impale him. Naruto bared his teeth as he glared at his other half. That's a good look for you. Now, goodbye, Naruto, off. Naruto could do nothing but blink as a foot suddenly slammed into Yami's face. The other boy's cheeks seemed to cave in for a second as the foot pounded him, but then he was lifted off his feet, spinning around like a top before slamming into the ground. Get your hands off my Naruto, a female voice said. Gasping as the pain from having a foot digging into his ribs was removed, Naruto sat up, groaning, and looked toward the source of the voice. A woman stood before him. Her long red hair swayed gently in an unseen breeze. Naruto only had a glimpse of her profile, but he could make out fair skin and bright blue eyes. The green dress that she wore complemented her figure. It was sleeveless and had straps tying it together from the back, making Naruto think of an apron almost. Underneath her green dress was a sleeveless white shirt. You are. The woman glanced over at Naruto and gave him a grin that was oh so familiar. He recognized that grin. How could he not? It was the same grin he often gave. Naruto, I know this might seem a little weird, but my name is Kushina Uzumaki, and I am your mother. Am my mother? Naruto was startled, but he stood up and looked at the woman. Are you really? Yes. Kushina smiled at him. However, a surge of chakra made them both snap their heads toward Yami, who had stolen another tael's worth of chakra from Akane. I'm sorry. I would love to talk with you some more, but now is not the time. Let's take care of this guy first. Alright. Naruto winced as he stepped up to stand beside the woman claiming to be his mom. Yami was glaring at them both, though his eyes flickered with uncertainty when they landed on Kushina. HMPH. You must be a chakra imprint left behind by the seal, he said. I see now. When the Yondaime Hokage sealed that bitch inside of us, he also left a portion of your chakra with us. That's right. Kushina adopted a fighting stance, feet spread apart and hands raised in a guard. I'm a chakra imprint left behind to act as a guardian to the sealed Akane. In the event that the seal ever came loose or broke, I would become active and act to repair the seal. She paused, then took a shuddering breath. It was also done so I could see my little boy at least once, to talk to him at least once. Like I care about why you're here. You're just getting in my way, mother. Yami burst forward, disappearing like he had done last night. However, while Naruto had trouble keeping track of him, Kushina didn't seem to suffer from the same problem. 6 chains erupted from her back and speared the ground in front of them, creating a thick wall. Yami reappeared as he slammed into the wall of chains, bouncing off them and tumbling to the ground. Come on, Naruto. I'm right behind you. The chains retracted as Naruto and Kushina rushed forward. Yami stood to his feet and prepared to attack them both, but Kushina was in his face before he could. A taijutsu battle began as the two traded numerous punches and kicks, each attack sending shockwaves across the seal. The two seemed evenly matched. Kushina was more than capable of blocking Yami's attacks, and she dished out just as much punishment as she gave. Naruto was in awe. However, he didn't want her to be the only one working. Rasengan. Naruto moved in from the side and tried to plunge a Rasengan into Yami's ribs. It didn't work as planned. Yami leapt away from his attack and stuck out his foot to trip Naruto. However, just before his legs could hit Yami's outstretched foot, Kushina's chains wrapped around Yami's arm and pulled him forward, forcing him to retract his foot and ground himself. Spinning around, Naruto kept his Rasengan maintained and slammed it into Yami's stomach, thrusting his jutsu as far into his dark half as he could. Yami screamed as he was lifted off the ground. Unable to right himself, he struck the floor and rolled for several meters. That hardly ended the battle, though. It seemed Yami's durability had grown along with his power and chakra. With a ferocious roar, he slammed his hands onto the ground. The earth split. Naruto had never seen anything quite like it. It was as if the ground was swelling like a tidal wave. He and Kushina leapt out of the way, but they had to split up, and Yami used their sudden separation to attack Naruto. Hijike. Bone-shattering pain flared in his arms as he tried to block Yami's punch. He skidded across the ground as steam wafted from his damaged arms, which were throbbing with a dull pain. Don't think having our mom on your side means you've won. Yami rushed up to him. I'll kill you. I will kill you. Not on my watch, you won't. Before Yami could get within 2 meters of Naruto, several chains wrapped around his arm and yanked him back. Yami stumbled as his left arm became stretched. Seeing this as an opportunity, Naruto created a Rasengan as he darted forward. The Rasengan soon increased in size, until it was about twice the size of Naruto's head. Lifting it over his head, he bore down on Yami and slammed his jutsu right on his other half's head. Udama Rasengan. Leaping back as the massive explosion engulfed Yami, Naruto placed a hand on his still bruised ribs and waited on bated breath to see if his attack had injured his opponent. Is that really all you've got? Naruto felt a sense of dread crawl up his spine as the smoke cleared. Yami stood there, completely unharmed. Even his clothing looked fine. I'm disappointed in you, brother. You really are weak. It would be better for both of us if I was the one in charge. As if to dispute his words, Kushina walked up to stand beside Naruto. Her glare was fierce as she stared at Yami with an expression like a mother who'd just seen her child do something disappointing. Don't talk like you're any stronger than Naruto. The only reason you were able to withstand his attack is because you drained Akane of her power. That power isn't yours. That strength isn't yours. You're just leeching power off of Akane. Shut up, woman. Yami snapped. It might have been hers at one point, but it's my power now. Mine. I claimed it for my own. Kushina shook her head. You deluded brat. It seems mom needs to give you a spanking. Then come and try it. Yami screamed, spittle flying from his mouth. Fine, but don't say I didn't warn you. Kushina rolled up imaginary sleeves. And don't start crying when I spank your ass so hard it becomes red. Naruto felt a sense of surrealism come over him as the woman claiming to be his mom talked about spanking his dark half. It was enough to make him wonder if all this wasn't a dream. Hey, Naruto, Kushina whispered. Despite my words, Yami is actually way stronger than I am. So here's the plan. I'm going to hold him down, and then I want you to finish him off. How can I do that? Asked Naruto. You saw what happened when I attacked him with that Udama Rasengan. I didn't even scratch him. True, but that's only because you haven't used your full power. Kushina looked at him from the corner of her eye. Don't you have an ability that lets you maximize the amount of chakra you can use? Use that. I'll give you enough time to transform and charge up a powerful attack. Before Naruto could even say something, Kushina darted forward and engaged Yami in another round of taijutsu combat. Of course, it wasn't just taijutsu that was used. Yami seemed to have grown impatient, and so he'd begun using some really destructive jutsu. The ground was sliced to ribbons as he generated vacuum blades, the earth shook as his wind attacks demolished the ground, craters and pockmarks began appearing with regular frequency. Throughout it all, Kushina wove around and dodged the attacks as she fought back with a combination of seals in her chakra chains. Naruto understood what Kushina wanted from him. Her words came back. She wanted him to use his yokai form to defeat Yami. Taking a deep breath, he shunted the pain aside and tried to focus, to reach deep inside of himself, where his power was safely locked away. He closed his eyes and blocked out the sounds of battle. Delving deep into his psyche, Naruto reached the spot where his power was stored. The sound of a key, slowly turning, echoed in his mind as Naruto unlocked his power. He could feel it rush through him. His fatigue faded, the damage done to him by Yami healed, and his mind became clear. Were he to look in a mirror, Naruto knew he'd see someone who no longer looked fully human. A loud explosion made Naruto open his eyes. The battle between Kushina and Yami was heating up. Kushina fired water bullets that seemed like a normal jutsu at first, but when Yami destroyed them with chakra-infused fists, the water exploded and wrapped around him, quickly transforming into water chains. Before he could do anything, Kushina unleashed a wind technique similar to Naruto's Senpuken, which snapped Yami's head back. However, if that was all it took to defeat Yami, then they wouldn't have been having this problem to begin with. Yami broke the chains with sheer brute force. Then he unleashed a powerful wind jutsu that ravaged the ground. Kushina protected herself by creating a dome with her chains. When the jutsu ran its course, she then launched the chains at Yami, who destroyed them with vacuum blades. You old hag. Don't think I'm going to let you defeat me. An old hag, am I? I'll show you not to disrespect your mother, you brat. Several droplets of sweat trailed down Naruto's face as he listened to the insults the two were hurling at each other. However, he knew not to let himself get distracted. Slapping his cheeks, Naruto put his game face on and raced across the ground. Kushina saw him coming and quickly launched more chains at Yami. They were destroyed easily. However, several more chains sprang from the ground and wrapped around the boy. He tried to break him, but then numerous seals lit up on the chains. Huh? Kushina barked as she pointed at Yami. How do you like that? You see those seals? They were specifically designed to seal away the Kyuubi's power, and since you're using the Kyuubi's chakra, all that power you felt so proud of is useless. What the, you fucking hag. Release me. Fuck no. Do it now, Naruto. Right. Naruto created a shadow clone, and then had it help him create a Rasenshuriken. The familiar bell-like screech filled the air as Naruto raced forward. The clone dispelled. Holding the Rasenshuriken aloft, Naruto closed the distance between him and Yami before slamming his jutsu into his other half. Damn you. Damn you both. Yami's enraged and agonized scream echoed over the howling wind as Naruto's technique exploded against him. Don't think this is the end. I will defeat you. I will not let myself disappear again. The dome of white wind chakra expanded as Naruto and Kushina stood there. Naruto held his now damaged arm, which slowly healed thanks to his yokai form. He tested his hand and wrist to make sure it worked properly, then turned to Kushina. Mom, Naruto was unable to continue as Kushina hugged him. I'm so glad I was able to see you. She leaned back to stare into his eyes. I wish we could talk more, but there's something we need to do. Something we need, like what? The moment this question left his lips, the earth around them began to rumble. Naruto looked around. His eyes bulged when several cracks appeared in the sky. It wasn't just the sky either. Cracks were appearing all over the place. It was as though the world were being slowly shaken apart. Because Yami destroyed the original seal in order to steal Akane's power, this place can no longer maintain itself, Kushina explained. And because the seal is gone, I can't repair it. Then, what can we do? I'll show you. Come on. Kushina turned toward Akane, who was still chained to the pillar. Suddenly realizing that she was in danger, Naruto raced past his mom and ran up to the other redhead, who gazed at him with a forlorn look. Akane, are you okay? Why do you care? She asked, and though her words were belligerent, her tone was filled with sadness. What are you talking about? Of course I care. Do you know how long I've been trying to speak with you? Akane bit her lip and nodded. Then she looked away. Naruto would have asked what was wrong, but Kushina had walked up by this point. You two can talk about your lover's spat later, she said. Right now, we need to remove the seal binding Akane to this pillar. It's draining her chakra. Naruto, you should understand enough about sealing to create a counterseal that can get rid of these. Help me remove them, quickly. Kushina's words were followed by action. She began methodically creating seals using the Fuinjutsu method where she used her chakra as a replacement for ink. Naruto watched her work for a moment, and then turned to one of the chains. She was right. It was a fairly simple seal, though because of how many seals were involved in this array's construction, it looked more complicated than it really was. Following his mom's example, Naruto's fingers glowed a bright blue as he began remove the seals. With each seal they removed, the chains around Akane disappeared. The last chain to disappear was the one wrapped around her middle. When it did, she fell forward, but Naruto appeared there to catch her. He almost fell under her weight. So much of her strength had disappeared that she couldn't even hold herself up. Naruto lifted her into a princess carry, and while Akane complained about how humiliating it was to be held like this by a human, she didn't have the strength to break free. Well, it looks like this is it. Kushina smiled sadly. What? The seal that kept Akane inside of you is gone. That seal was also what kept me here. Without it, I can't stay here anymore. Wah, no. But, what about our talk? I thought we were going to get to talk more. So did I. Kushina looked like she was on the verge of tears. I wish things could be different. I'm sorry, Naruto. God damn it. Naruto knew there was nothing they could do about this, but that was what he hated. He despised that he could do nothing in this situation. He was powerless. Before I go, I have a few things to tell you, Kushina said. Naruto looked up. Naruto, you're going to experience a lot of pain and suffering. Remember who you are. Find a goal, a dream, and don't stop trying until it comes true. There's so much more that I want to say. To teach you, I want to stay with you, I love you. Naruto didn't know why, but he felt like he'd heard those words before. He tried to stem the flow of tears that dripped down his face. He sniffled once. A soft hand touched his cheeks and began wiping at his tears. It was Akane. He looked down as she touched his face, a complicated expression twisting her fair features, though she stopped and turned away from him the moment she noticed his eyes on her. Akane, by this point, Kushina's body was translucent and disappearing fast. I'm sorry you and I never saw eye to eye. I hope you can eventually forgive me. Also, I want you to be more honest with your feelings. I've been watching you mope ever since you locked Naruto out, and it's annoying. Stop that. Be honest with yourself. That's the only way to live a long and happy life. Pretentious brat, Akane muttered. You're 1,000 years too young to lecture me. I really wish I could stay longer. Just like with Naruto, Kushina's eyes were welling with tears. But it looks like this is it. I love you, Naruto. I love you so much. Goodbye. A loud cracking sound like shattering glass echoed all around them as the seal completely broke down. Kushina disappeared seconds later. Then Naruto and Akane's world became engulfed in a blinding white light. XOX. There was no telling how much time had passed, how long he'd been stuck inside of that seal, but when Naruto came to, a scene of devastation presented itself before him. Once towering buildings were nothing but rubble now. Fire and smoke clogged the atmosphere. The heat from the numerous fires singed his skin. A weight in his arms made Naruto look down. He was holding someone, a young woman with hair like fire and pale skin. She didn't have a stitch of clothing on. The gentle swell of her breasts, the lovely contours of her waist and hips, all of it was on display. Her naked body was pressed firmly against his as he carried her like a princess, the large swell of her breast pushing into his chest. Akane. So the seal that had kept her locked inside of him really was gone. It looked like she was unconscious right now, perhaps due to the backlash that came from leaving the seal. Even he didn't understand how this worked. Seals that were powerful enough to keep Biju locked up were complicated. The one that kept Akane imprisoned was even more so. What's more, a situation like this had never happened before. A sealed Biju being unsealed and the Jinchuriki surviving the process. Naruto suspected the only reason he was still alive was because he was no longer human. As much as he would like to ponder the situation more, Naruto understood that now was not the time. He looked around some more. He could not find a single trace of pain, the group of 6 people he'd been fighting. What had happened while he was stuck inside of the seal? Naruto had no recollection. He wandered through the destitute streets of the city he once called Aim. This place really was a wreck. Some buildings had been gutted, while others had been demolished entirely. Naruto sent chakra to his legs and jumped onto the largest piece of rubble he could find. Surveying the city, he almost cringed at what he saw. A megacore was destroyed, demolished, gone. He'd assumed maybe just this one section of the city had been damaged, but no, it looked like the entire hidden village was no more. Everywhere he looked, he saw nothing but destruction, destruction, destruction. The only odd thing about all this was that he saw no corpses amid the ruins. He hoped that meant the villagers had been able to escape. In the center of the city sat a large sphere, similar to the one that Jiraiya had been captured in, but far larger. He'd estimate the size at maybe 50 or even 60 meters in diameter. Unmoving, it remained situated between several destroyed buildings. Hopping back down from the rubble, Naruto waded through the city. First things first, he needed to find clothing for Akane. Holding a naked girl was awkward. It took more time than he would have liked, but Naruto did eventually find a simple set of clothing, an overly large t-shirt and some shorts. Unfortunately, the shorts didn't fit because her tails kept getting in the way. She only had 6. Naruto suspected it was because Yami had stolen the other 3. Still, he had to forego the shorts, which meant instead of carrying a naked fox lady, he was carrying a half-naked fox lady with no panties. That didn't make him feel much better. He wandered the ruined city a bit longer. He didn't know what he was searching for. Jiraiya's remains. Pain. That Konan lady he had been fighting. In either event, Naruto soon came to realize that there was no point in remaining in a megacore and made his way out of the village. A megacore was surrounded mostly by flatlands and rivers. Naruto followed the path that he thought would take him back to Konoha via one of those many rivers, which wound back and forth in a curved pattern like a lazy snake resting on the ground. He blinked once as his vision blurred, paused to shake his head, and then began moving again. Akane rested in his arms. Her eyes were closed and her breathing even. She seemed to be sleeping. As he walked, her legs swung back and forth, dainty feet bouncing as he followed the winding path. The sun overhead was setting, traveling down past a range of mountains, though he could barely see it thanks to the clouds covering the sky. He would need to find a place to stop for the night. With a grunt, Naruto shifted the woman in his arms. He soon found a mercifully dry spot of land. It was underneath the shade of a large rock that jutted from the ground. Setting Akane down so she was resting against the rock, he reached down for his ninja pouch, only to grimace when he realized it wasn't there. His ninja pouch must have been destroyed or lost. That meant he had no supplies. Just great. Naruto sat down against the rock next to Akane, stretched out his legs, and looked up at the cloudy sky. He really hoped it didn't rain. He also hoped he hadn't jinxed himself by hoping it wouldn't rain. As he continued gazing at the sky, Naruto nearly jumped when something landed on his lap. He looked down. It was Akane. She must have fallen over. Her head was now resting on his lap as she took several deep breaths, shoulders moving with the motion. He frowned as he reached out and caressed her hair. It was soft. The longer he continued stroking her hair, the more Naruto became aware of his own aches and pains. His limbs were sore and stiff, his back felt like it had been repeatedly broken and healed, his mind was slowly dimming like a flickering light bulb on the verge of going out, and his heart ached as if it had been stabbed with a kunai. His head drooped as his mind dimmed even more. He stopped stroking Akane's hair as his arm became too heavy to move. He lifted his head up, but then it fell again as darkness encroached on his vision. Just before he lost consciousness, Naruto saw a pair of dark-skinned feet in shinobi sandals appear in front of him. Thank you for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next part.